lead us in a pledge, and then Mr. Hyatt will lead us in a prayer.
Okay, we ready? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for all your blessings. Lord, it be your will. We ask you to bless our staff here at the schools. We will continue to seek your wisdom, courage, and strength through these difficult times. Lord, please help us to be wise in the decisions we make here tonight. Please help us to make decisions that are for the good of all involved. Dear Lord, let us always seek your will in all that we do and say. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Now we'll go ahead and call our meeting to order.
Ms. Burns, unless any of you have additions to the agenda, I don't have anything that is different than what you have been given already.
Do either of you have anything to add to the agenda? No. Okay. Trying to catch up with Kim.
For the record, Kim Carpenter is with us remotely tonight, and Lambert is not able to be here with us because he's had a death in the family. Just so that everybody is on the same page with that. Last meeting, we looked at several board policies, and because of all of the other issues that we're going to be looking at tonight, I am not inclined to spend a whole lot of time on those. I would like to draw your attention in your packet for this month. You should have gotten a new 40-40-7310, right?
Yes, we did.
The reason that is new is Ms. Burns brought attention to the fact that there needed to be some clarification in the third paragraph about who volunteers are, who we should be concerned about. And I sent it to Chris Campbell, and he changed that bottom sentence that you should be in, I believe, blue for you. And it reads, for the purposes of this policy, the terms staff and employees includes independent contractors, school safety officers, and volunteers, but do not include Swain County student employees or student volunteers. And I believe that was the intent that you had. That way, we don't have to have the same level of concern necessarily about the policy for student and staff relations, okay? So, do we have any questions or thoughts on that one? You should also have a new version of 4325. And I told you that I was going to send that to Chris and to talk to him about the fact that the School Board Association had stricken the word transmitting, and they were assuming that possessing and delivering would probably cover the act of transmitting as well. But I wanted to be very clear in this policy because as a former principal, there are times when people like to play with words, and I think that it's important that our administrators in their decision-making have the opportunity to say, well, you may not have been delivering, but you certainly were carrying it to somebody, and that's transmitting, okay? Because someone might try to play on delivering as though they were selling, all right? Chris said that's absolutely fine. It's a simple addition, so we've added that word back. It might seem moot, but I want to make sure that we're crystal clear on this one, okay? And that's the drug and alcohol policy for anybody who's listening. And then the last one was 6125. And there was a concern about the fact that we have in the past allowed students to carry medication like ibuprofen and Tylenol and things like that. And I spoke with Carol Schell about that, our lead nurse, and she said we have an approval process that parents can sign and send in that will say my son or daughter can carry this over-the-counter medication. And you will see that I had Chris change that on page 3 under section C. And it's in the middle the big change here. However, by way of a limited exception, over-the-counter medications such as ibuprofen or Tylenol may be carried by students with written consent from the parent or guardian on file with building administration and nurse. And notice the next sentence says that approval may be denied or withdrawn by the building administration at any time. Okay? So that allows students who are old enough to be trusted with that, to carry those medications. Do you have any questions or concerns about that addition? I thought that it was, I still have a little concern about it, but at the same time, we had a process, and it was already being used. So I thought we might as well continue. Okay?
Kim, do you have any questions or concerns?
No, I don't.
Okay, great, thank you.
Now, I know that there's a boatload of policies. Are there any of these that you want to discuss since we're looking at second reading tonight?
I'm satisfied with what we did last time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Now, I know there's a lot, but
Yeah.
we'd
it's a
spend
lot.
30 minutes going over those, you know? Okay. Then when it comes time to approve, we'll put all of these together and approve them in bulk, if that's okay with you.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Now, tonight, one of the primary things that we're looking at, and I don't want to minimize anything else, but one of the primary things that we're looking at is the remote learning plan. This particular plan was mandated by the General Assembly, actually by the Senate, back in the spring, in Senate Bill 704. And in that particular bill, they specified 13 different points that have to be covered. LaVonda, would you pull that up so anyone who is watching can see that? On the remote learning plan, and I want to give you a different copy,
Okay.
because the copy that you have is a draft, and there were pieces that needed to be completed on it. This is the copy with all of the additions, subtractions, links, and everything. And of course, you can't get to the links unless you're looking at it by computer. And so I had LaVonda come tonight for several reasons, but she has the digital version on the screen
On the
in front of
screen.
her. So if there's a link that you want to see, she can open it up.
Great.
On the left side of the policy, where you see the numbers, those numbers are actually the requirements that came from the general legislature. Until you get to the very end, and you look down at number 13, it's next to the last page, there are some additional requirements that follow those that aren't numbered. Those came from the state school board.
Okay.
So it was a bill that was approved and then became policy through the state school board, all right? And it was sent to us, and we were told that we had to address each one of these elements. I chose to start with a little bit of an introduction because I wanted anyone who sees this to understand our framework that we were working from as far as our thinking. And I think, to be succinct, the only piece that I really want to draw attention to on that introduction is the last sentence right before where it says Swain County Remote, where it says, following these guidelines, we expect remote learning to be more than a supplement to the classroom. It is to be a vital part of the complete instructional experience. The reason that I put that in is in the spring, all across the state, the remote instruction plans that people were using were probably a little soft because we had a day pretty much to turn around and provide something. And then we didn't have the opportunity to use any level of accountability or to expect attendance or participation. When this came out, all of that changed. And I'm saying all of this on purpose because I think that there may be some in the community right now who think that the remote learning opportunity, which we're calling Plan C, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, I'm afraid that some in the community believe that what they're going to be having for remote instruction is similar to the spring. And while it may be similar in some ways, it's going to have much more weight.
Good.
And the reason for that is because of a statement beside in section 9. And it's the first word in that statement. Thank you. That first word is ensuring. Ensuring that remote instructional time, practice, and application components support learning growth that continues towards mastery in the standard course of study. If we're going to be expected to have any level of assurance, we have to make sure that what we're offering in our remote instruction has as much equity to what is happening in the classroom. Now, I will go on record and say we will never be able to provide the same level of instruction remotely that you can or we can in the classroom. Ever. Because having a set of eyes and a mouth in front of you to work with you allows clarification on the spot and good communication. Nevertheless, we've taken this very seriously, and I want to go through it with a few sections because this is pretty much the first time that you've had an opportunity to sit down and focus on it and talk to us about it. I'm going to bring Karen Cook in to talk about some of the preliminary parts. As Karen is coming in, oh, look at that, she's already here.
She appears.
The process that we used for this, we developed a group at the central office. We worked through this. We made sure that it was meeting the expectations that we thought the document needed to have. Then we put it in front of some teachers and asked for their input. And there were significant suggestions that they made that we have also included. And now we've brought it back and finalized it. So Karen, if you would talk about the survey results that we've been using and also the device and connectivity availability.
So basically, we wanted to ensure that we had sufficient devices for all our students and staff. Glasses are going to fog up, sorry. And so Swain County Schools started a one-to-one at Swain County High School 10 years ago, and eventually we've expanded that to that one-to-one in grades 3 through 8 for 5 years now. Our K-2 students, though, have only been using classroom sets of iPads. But for the upcoming school year, we do plan to be one-to-one for grades K through 12. This will require the addition of Chromebooks in our second grade classrooms, and then we'll be pushing down the iPads we have in those second grade classrooms and pushing them into K1 so that we can be one-to-one in those grades. We also provide a laptop for all teachers already. That's part of our standard practice. But this past spring, we also expanded that to include our teacher assistants because they are important pieces of our instructional support as well. Kind of skipping around, it's like really sections 1, 4, and 5, but they really go together as far as from the technology point of view. So 4 talks about basically connectivity, which is a huge concern for us when we move to online learning, just because of the area we live in. We surveyed staff this past spring, and 94 responded and 5 had no internet. Of those that responded, only 11% had access to what we call true broadband, which is like the feds describe it as 25 down, 3 up. So that it makes it difficult for some of our teachers to do instruction at home. So many of them continued to work in our school buildings, even if they were isolated in their classroom, and that may continue. About 84% of them use mobile hotspots, satellite, and DSL, which, as you probably know, they slow down with certain data usage limits. For our students, we actually had survey data from our device turn-in when we gave them in May, but we only had a 57% response rate, which did reveal about only 12% of students with no connectivity and only 23% with true broadband, which makes it difficult if you have a teacher that wants to do Google Meet and they want to have some sort of interaction where they're actually seeing the child. However, in March, our teachers actually polled the students. They didn't ask what kind of connectivity, but they asked if they had connectivity. And at that point in time, only 21% said they had no connectivity, which we think is probably a very accurate representation of our students. Prior to March, we had 10 Khajiit hotspots available for checkout. And what that is like a hotspot, like you may have a Verizon wireless mobile hotspot or hotspot on your phone. This is something similar to that, but it is filtered. It adds a layer of filtering for those students. After March, we added 10 additional, and we received 30 from RESA, but those are limited as far as subscriptions. We only got a 4-month subscription. That's one of those things we're trying to find ways to fund the subscription, basically, for those hotspots. One of the ways that we were able to get folks, our students and our staff, connected was through our community partnership. You can go on our website and view our community access point document. We have many, many sites on there, which allowed students to get connected to complete homework in a lot of our parking lots, including our school parking lots, but also a lot of using the town wireless and things like that. Much of this connectivity was due to local internet providers, Skywave and Zitto Media. Skywave set up multiple community hotspots at businesses and churches to allow students to connect, and Zitto Media did the same at the Alorca Fire Department. We continue to have a great partnership, especially with Skywave, and they have committed to continuing that. We're also working with Hometown Strong, which is a state initiative to look for opportunities to work with vendors, maybe like Verizon, to be able to offer some low-cost options. So that's sort of from the technology point of view. Any other questions?
Some of the data that Karen was talking about is in the graph, the pie chart, that I had LaVonda pull up, because I wanted, if anyone is watching on YouTube right now, I want them to see those divisions. So I don't know if Joe can pull in on those. There are several people who believe that they have broadband, but if you look at that upper right-hand blue corner, even though it says 234, that's only 24% of our student population. The largest section of our student population is actually using DSL, and that limits the farther you get away from the connection hub with the phone lines, the less you're able to do because your download speed decreases. So I think that that's important data for everyone to see, but it's also important for the community to know that we have been working very, very hard to improve that. The First Baptist Church has agreed to allow us to put some stations in and connect them either to whichever of the providers that will enable us to do that. And Kevin King has also given us permission to use a significant portion of the Ed Center and set up stations down there. And our plan right now is to use some of the staff, and Tommy will talk about this in just a little while, to use some of the staff who may not be comfortable coming back into the classroom right now, but they're not looking for leave, to use some of them to man those even up to 8 p.m. at night. That way we can have remote learners come in when their parents get off work even, and get some assistance if they need to. And I bring all that to the table tonight because I want everyone to understand we are trying to help all of our students have the best connectivity as possible. There will still be some that will not be able to. And in our remote plan, we have addressed that also by saying that there will be some who will be a traditional paper and pencil in some ways, like it's particularly pre-K. And then there will be some others probably who will have to use a download.
Offline.
An offline system where when you log in at school, it downloads into your computer. Okay, but that's all built into this plan. Okay, is there anything else?
I think so. Any questions?
Questions?
What about students that might be at the head of big company, for example, we have several coming out of there, or at the head of Alorca or Western Creek? What's the closest place they could come and get a hotspot or whatever?
So we are working with Skywave to try to identify more community community spots where we need to, maybe Big Cove to hook it up, if they can get connectivity to that location. Alarka, we have the Alarka Fire Department. We like Stevenson Branch, we have one at the Mount Zion Church. Round Hill, we have one at Midway. So Cherokee, most of that is provided by the Cherokee, the downtown, the free Wi-Fi that is downtown. That's most of what we have in Cherokee. Yes.
I'm going to initiate conversation also with, I'm not sure who on the tribe, to see if we could even have some sites there where we might be able to put some, it's like a cluster of computers that are already connected with Wi-Fi or something, so that those students who are ours might be able to use those as well. I'm thinking about community buildings and other things like that. I just don't know about that yet. I know that Skywave has been working to improve Wesser Creek. Isn't that part of the grant?
I think Mineral Springs, Stevenson Branch is
Yeah.
where their latest grant is. They're actually waiting to hear from a grant. And
Okay.
if that goes through the great grant, I think that area will get connectivity pretty quickly.
And also part of that great grant, if I'm not mistaken, is Need More.
I'm not sure.
I'm-
I know.
They're either working towards Need More or that's part of this next grant, because there's a need for service there also.
Does the casino does it have Wi-Fi in it?
I would imagine so. I don't-
That would go so far outside the building, wouldn't it?
I would
Now, I
think,
don't know.
I would think their parking lots are covered, yeah.
So when we say we have sites like at First Baptist Church, does that mean people can just drive up and sit in the parking lot?
Yes.
Or they,
Yes.
okay, that's what I thought.
Yes,
yeah.
it was not uncommon for one of our teachers to go to our church at Midway and actually set up in her car and spend multiple hours there. Now, we ended up giving her access to the building so she could set her, she'd
Sure,
have a place.
absolutely.
But, yeah, that's what they'll do. They'll set up.
Is it available anytime?
Yes.
They actually will lower bandwidth rates, I think, after 7 p.m. And a lot of that was particularly at the churches, so that folks weren't in there during the church services, maybe on a Wednesday night. But to be honest, I don't think that was really a problem.
They may have lowered it, but they never really stopped it, and
No.
people were using it for their own personal use. But you can't stop that.
Right, yeah.
I don't know how.
So now, basically, what I'm understanding is every student has a computer or a pad.
When we start the school year, we want to make sure that K through 12, right now 3 through 12 does, but we are working really hard to make sure we have a device to give to those K2 students as
And
well.
if they don't have internet anywhere near their house or in their house.
Right, if
can
they
go to
don't
these
have internet at
spots.
home, they could still drive to one of these community hotspots and do their work in the parking lot.
And we're going to vote extra teachers try to help with some of that.
Yeah, and Tommy will cover that in a little while. He'll
Oh,
show
okay.
you numbers, because we've already surveyed the staff.
Sound good.
Uh,
And we're going to be accountable this time.
Yes. And that's one of the pieces that's in this remote learning plan. There is an accountability factor both for students and also for staff.
Okay.
Okay? Any questions for Karen?
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Now, another piece that I want to share with you, and the reason I'm going to use the boards is because I'm a teacher at heart, I guess. And I like to feel the chalk under my fingernails. This ties so deeply into the reentry plan that it's difficult to talk about the two separately. So what we're finding right now, and Tom will cover this as well, I'm just doing your job for you, Tom. What we're finding is in our survey results that we've got a large group of students and families who are wanting face-to-face instruction. We're going to go ahead and call them Plan B. And we've got another group of students who are really looking more at Plan C. Okay? But there are enough students here to where we're finding that we need a way to provide a service for them and not overtax the teachers who are going to be delivering face-to-face instruction. So we're looking at a couple of products, and for now, I'm just going to call them E1 and E2 because they both start with an E. And we're going to dedicate ourselves to using one of these to serve these students. And that will allow us to use more of the teachers that Tommy has in the list that we're looking for an alternate assignment. It will allow them to facilitate this and take the responsibility off of these teachers. That way they can focus on what they're doing in the classroom more. Does that make sense? Because we're really concerned about the fact that we're going to be asking our teachers to do an awful lot right now.
You're thinking right now that in Plan B, those teachers will only be in school. They don't have to do both.
Thank you for asking that question.
You might want to repeat it, I'm not sure that it.
The question that Travis asked was, the teachers who are working in Plan B will be in the classroom only, not doing both. They will still have to deliver a level of remote instruction, but not long-term. Because there will still be students over here who will have to miss and be out, and we still have remote instruction days that we've built into the calendar by legislation, okay? So these teachers will be responsible for what we're going to call short-term. And those are things that the students can do in between the days when they might be in the building. Does that make sense? Now, our hope, Travis, is that we'll be able to get enough training for one of these to also spread it into there and let them have that as a tool. But that needs to be down the road because they've got enough to worry about already. Okay? Does that make sense to you? But the answer to your question is, they will not be responsible here, but they will be responsible for some here. I think that they can accomplish that, though. And that's the best answer that I can give to you. By removing this piece, though, that's a significant step of support for them, and it's also a significant step of support for these students. Okay? Does that make sense to you? All right? With that in mind, I want you to turn in your remote learning plan. And Kim, I should have turned you toward the board. I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm listening. And I've got the remote learning plan in front of me.
Okay.
All good.
I want you to look at section 8. There are expectations for our teachers in how they develop lesson plans to deliver remote instruction. But I think one of the critical pieces, can you pull up section 8 and show the time limits? One of the significant pieces is that we have established some limits for the students. These are based upon two things. They're based upon recommendations that came to us, I think through was it the Friday Institute that we got these from? Do y'all remember?
Friday Institute and,
Me too.
the national boards are national boards.
And national boards. And then we also used the survey data that came back from teachers and put the two together and came up with, you see, and this goes to your question, Travis, you see how there's a limited remote learning, the Plan B piece? Because if we truly flex students and they're not in class every day, instead they have remote learning on some days, then we have one group of students that have to have services provided by their classroom teachers so that it will tie into what they're doing. But there's another group, the smaller group, who's going to be on a full remote learning, kind of a Plan C, all right? And, yes, ma'am.
Just so I can understand from not looking at the board, so the set of teachers who are working under Plan C, where there's the hybrid component of this whole plan, will be responsible for those children either in classroom or remotely the entire semester, for example.
That's the intent.
And those responsible for those who are just remote learning who've chosen that path.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes. That's a good, solid foundation, basic understanding. Yes, ma'am. Now, it's not quite that simple, but when you talk about the logistics of administration, but yes, that's the way to think of it. Okay? And then you see on the full remote learning that there are time limits as well, but they're more extensive. It's longer because those students are getting all of their curriculum remotely. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't have connection with some teachers or facilitators, but it won't be the same. It just can't. Does that make sense? So I wanted you to see that we've thought about how long do we want kids in front of screens and what do we want them to be doing. You have any questions? And there's another piece that we need to bring out that's pretty important, and that's section number 11. There has to be an attendance component by general statute. And the way that we're going to track attendance for these students is by what they turn in, the work they turn in. And we're concerned about making it by participation because of the potential for connectivity interruption. So you may have connectivity this morning, but you'll not have connectivity this afternoon, but you were planning on it. And so you could be counted absent. And that really is not their fault. So instead, we're trying to ensure a level of equity with that and say, if you turn your products in the way that we're asking you to, then you'll be counted present. Does that make sense to you? We think that's fair and equitable. Another piece to consider is, and I don't know that we should necessarily be flipping all around because I don't want to confuse you, but at number 9, there will be some appropriate grading. There has to be grading, but teachers will be using similar grading methods that they would in the classroom. It'll be based on the attainment of mastery of standards, the quality of the work, typical grading techniques that teachers would use in the classroom. Now, why am I making those points tonight? Because I want to go back to something I said a little while ago. I'm afraid that there are some in the community who believe that the remote learning that will happen this year is going to be just like what happened in the spring, and it is not. Now, we will offer the same level of support and even more, but it is more organized now, and the expectations are higher now because we have to in order to guarantee the education that we have been charged to give. We have to ensure what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay? Now, that this all has to come with training. It's got to come with training for the students, and we're building that into their entrance into the school. And the teachers will be helping students understand how to do all of this in the classroom. There will be digital instruction or digitally delivered instruction on how to complete these processes for the students that are using remote learning. We want to make sure that they have the support that they need. There will also be telephone hotlines for the students to access, and they can also access teachers by email and with other traditional methods. So the connection and support for the students is there. But this is also going to require a tremendous amount of support for the teachers. Right? So Trina, you around here? Trina, who is kind of takes charge of that professional development piece.
Yeah, there's a little lag time.
I can't see.
Oh, yeah. You might as well get used to that.
No, it's okay. Trina, talk to us about the support that we're going to provide for the teachers and the staff.
Okay, so we know that the teachers are going to need a lot of support, that they were super stressed in the spring, and we don't want them to have to go through that again. So one thing that we're going to be providing is professional development. We're going to have like mini conferences at each school. Each school is going to design that themselves. I'll support them any way I can, but they're going to design it for the needs of their teachers. So they'll be getting exactly what they need in order to provide instruction to their students. So that'll be happening when we come back. And it'll be focused on remote learning, anything that we can do to help them with that. So that's great. We're excited about that. Any new programs that we'll be getting, in order to support our students at home doing remote learning, we'll make sure that they get the professional development they need for that, so they know how to run that really, really well. And so this can be a success and a win-win for everybody. Let's see. We're working on our Swain core. We're continuing to work on that. And one thing that we're going to do is identify power standards so that teachers can hit those most important, some people call them priority standards, so they can hit those most important standards, go back and pick up from March, things that kids are missing, maybe even farther than that, because they've probably lost more than that over this break. And they'll know exactly what to hit and start hitting those really hard so we can make sure our kids have a really strong foundation so they can move forward. PLCs, professional learning communities, are going to be super important. We're going to provide some training for that so that they can get better at using data to drive their instruction. And so we want to make sure that's going really well in all of our schools. Our coaches, our instructional coaches and our technology facilitators are going to be super important in their role in those PLCs and with our teachers. Providing expectations for online learning. I think Mr. Sale just talked about that. Making sure the teachers understand that they need to be expecting of their students, because that was way up in the air before, because we really didn't know. There was no guidance on that. It was like we built the ship as we went. So now we have some guidance, and that will help with that. Excuse me. We want to make sure that we have strong programs that we can use with fluidity in case somebody gets shut down. We can say, okay, these online programs are ready to go. We can start remote learning right now. And we can do that at a drop of a hat, because we feel like we probably will have to. Expectations of their lessons. We're going to make sure that teachers understand what those lesson plans need to look like. We're going to give them a template, make sure they have that, and that they are communicating their expectations to their students through learning targets, so that everybody knows what we're supposed to be learning. Parents, all stakeholders will know what we're supposed to be learning. And one thing that I want to talk to you about in a little bit is the SEL, the social emotional pieces, and the support we're going to give for our teachers and our students, because I think that's going to be one of the most important things we do when we get them back, because they've all been through a gamut of emotions, and we need to support them in that. And that's all I've got. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Trina? This is a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of, I can tell some of it, there's more stress and hard work,
Yeah.
and it's appreciated.
It gets bigger, it seems like, as we go through.
It really has been a team product, and we haven't even started talking about the reentry piece yet, because that's been a bigger issue than what you're looking at now. But I really want to capitalize on what Trina said just a minute ago about the SEL, the social emotional support for teachers. We're really, really, really concerned about their level of anxiety, and I really understand that. And if anybody is watching, because for some of our teachers, they've never seen this. We brought it to you first before we released it. We felt like that was the right course of action. Of course, we did have teacher input on it, but not all the teachers, right? I want to help everyone who is part of the education, part of our school system, understand we're going to take care of them. We're going to do everything that we can to minimize the anxiety and help them do the job that's in front of them. We have been given, in the education world, we have been given an enormous task. And we're going to do the very best that we can, but we're going to take care of our people along the way too. Okay? So I want to say that so that anybody's listening will know. Now, the other piece that we have to be very cautious of with everything that we're doing, and especially remote learning, are our students with exceptional needs.
Thank you.
And Brandon has done a fabulous job of working on some of these pieces for us, and I want him to explain how we're going to take care of kids with IEPs and 504s. Okay?
So last year when we went into remote learning, we developed a remote learning plan that all teachers made with families. And we tracked the services provided on another form that LaVonda made for us. This year, in preparation for the possibility of remote learning, that we may all have to go to 100% remote learning again, depending on how this virus goes. And we've had some parents that may choose to go 100% remote learning from day one. Our AC teachers have to develop what the state is calling a remote learning contingency plan for all students. Last year, our EC staff transitioned to a new program to document IEPs, individualized education plans, called ECATs. And we were hoping that this year would be smoother for them because last year was a lot. But unfortunately, we are going to have to meet very quickly with every student that has an IEP to develop a remote contingency plan. And in those plans, we have to decide, do the goals that we have for face-to-face instruction remain the same goals as if we transition to remote learning? What method of remote learning will the student participate in? Will it be packets only, or will it be a combination of like a Google Meet? What services will if they get speech, how are we going to build a day that they get regular ed services, speech services, and maybe they get occupational therapy also? How do we build a day that they get all of those services? The duration, how much during the time, how much time during a day are they going to get each of those services, or how often? And then one of the big things is the accommodations modifications. The accommodations modifications that get in a face-to-face classroom may be different than what is needed in a remote learning setting. These are all got to be done by 50 or IEP team meetings, which can be conducted remotely. You can do them through a Google Meet if a parent doesn't want to meet face-to-face. If there's just an amendment to the IEP, that's very minor changes, that can be done through phone conferences. So that there is some work that makes it a little bit easier, but this is going to be quite a bit on our special education teachers. Quite a bit of work and very little time to do it. And also, we have to think about our students with 504s. What do the accommodations modifications look like for a student with 504? I am going to modify the remote learning contingency plan that we're going to use for students with an IEP to make it work for students with 504s, so that we can have those on file and ready to go in case a parent of a student with a 504 selects to go remote right off, or if we have to transition to remote at any point in time during the school year. And then one of the things that I like about the programs that we have found, our students that are limited English proficiency, both of the programs we look at translate to Spanish, multiple language. There's multiple language that they translate to. So I thought that really helped take care of our limited English proficiency students. So as we start this year, please, all of our teachers need to be in our thoughts. But these teachers, special ed teachers also, with this extra paperwork they're going to have to work through. And then it's a lot of stress on our students with special needs being outside the classroom if that's what they require. So I appreciate it.
You have any questions for Brandon? Thank you. There's one more piece I want to share with you, if I can find where I put it in my laundry list out here. There it is. We want to make sure that everyone understands what the expectations are. And so I've asked Brandon to put together a remote learning compact. And this compact, which is included in the remote learning plan, shows exactly what I've said. These are the pieces that you're responsible for. I think that we have covered almost everything on here. The only piece that we haven't covered is the importance of a student who is trying to accomplish remote learning at home, to having a place where they can do that. In order to learn, you have to have it in a place where you can focus. And what we'll be asking parents to do is to provide a place where students can focus, whatever that means in their home or in their setting, and to help them, because it's hard enough to learn by yourself, and then when you've got distractions, it makes it 4 or 5 times harder. So every student will be asked, and parent and the school will be asked to sign these. as we move towards remote learning. Yes.
This was just a district,
Take the mic. Thank you.
this was just a district created, like overview. Each school has it. Like some of the wording is not appropriate in the student section for K2. So the elementary schools are working to make it appropriate. And all the schools are just working to make it appropriate for them before we have a finalized copy of this. And we've also noted that some of the technology pieces need to be added about the use of technology and respect of the technology.
Thank you, Brandon. I know that's the first time that you've seen that.
And my first thought was, you're doing the best you can do, but those students that can't find a distraction-free workplace are the same ones that couldn't find one when they come to school.
That's true.
So it's going to be harder on them, but there's nothing else you can do about that.
It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. The other students that do what they do in school, they're going to do it in schools.
Any questions on anything we've covered so far as the remote learning is concerned? Kim, do you have any questions?
No, sir, not at this point.
Do y'all have any thoughts that you want to add?
It's overwhelming.
Yes. Now, I emailed y'all this afternoon.
Yeah.
And I said, my fear is you're going to be overwhelmed this evening because we've only covered half of it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry for you all. I was having to do it.
And I apologize in another way. We need to get your stamp of approval on this tonight if we can, even though you're not super familiar with it. Because this has to be turned in to the state on Monday. We haven't delayed. It's just the timing has fallen this way. Okay, I tried to provide you all a copy of everything that we had as early as I could. Okay? Any questions at all?
But you're talking about the entire reentry plan?
No.
We submitted Monday?
No, I'm talking about the remote learning plan.
Okay.
The state
Thank you.
doesn't want to see our reentry plan. That's for our purpose, just as our guidance.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, if you are comfortable with moving forward, let's jump into the next big one. And Allison is here as Health Department Director. And this is what she said when I asked her to come. She said two things. Number one, I might not have the answer, but if we have questions for that she may not have the answer for, if we'll put them down on paper or somewhere, she'll get back with us. And the other piece that she said when she walked in the door is I have to leave at 7. Okay?
Ish, 7-ish.
7-ish. So if Allison has to leave, it's not because she doesn't like you. I know she doesn't like me. No, I'm teasing. We'll write our questions down and get them to her so that we can get some answers for her. Okay? Now, I've been talking a long time, and so I'm going to ask the Master of Ceremonies to come and get us started on the reentry presentation. And Kim, I'm going to turn the computer so that you can see the screen. Okay?
Thanks. Okay. I'll look at it on my computer as well.
Okay. All right.
This
So we'll just leave you sitting just like you are then.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're on.
All right. Got a PowerPoint that's getting ready to get kicked up here where you guys can see it. It's the Swain County Schools reopening August 2020, kind of an overview. I adapted this from something that we put out whenever we sent when we sent some information out to our faculty when we were trying to gauge their intent a week or so ago. And I'm not saying anything that you don't know, but COVID-19 has presented us with a whole bunch of stuff that we've never seen before, and neither has anybody else. And so we're all doing the best we can and making sure that we get the guidance from the places that we can get it from to do the best we can. You know what I mean? And we hope that everybody understands that what we're really asking for in this whole process is that people understand that we're not going into this lightheartedly. All right, next slide, please. All right, none of these decisions we've made or will make are going to be easy. And our focus has been and continues to be on doing what is best for the most while simultaneously providing choice, recognizing need, and preserving a level of freedom for individual stakeholders. We continue to be dedicated to providing the best options based on the use of data-driven decision-making, and we'd rather be right than fast. So these are just kind of a bulleted list of things that we have used to guide our thoughts. I don't feel the need to read those to you. You're capable of doing so. We just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our people. And again, we want to be right instead of fast. Next slide. All right. The governor has stated that schools will open with Plan B as the least restrictive option. And with that being said, our families may decide to utilize Plan B or C as they see fit for their children. That's where the freedom portion comes in that we were talking about. If they believe that it's best interest of their children for them to be, or a child, they have 3 kids and they decide that one of them needs to be in school as much as possible for their individual need, and the other one can work in a full remote environment, then they have that freedom and that autonomy to choose that for their children. They don't have to do one or the other for their household. It's per child. Next slide. We're working hard to do for our community as much as we can, safe and healthy schools, and that's our top priority. One of the things up here, social distancing, they're saying about 6 feet apart, talking about cloth face coverings. I promise you, nobody anywhere hates these worse than I do. Cleaning and hygiene. We want to talk about coping and resilience, not only for students, but also for faculty. This whole thing has been crazy for a lot of people. And it's affected people in various and sundry ways. We want to be there to make sure they understand they're not the only ones, and that we've got some people and some resources that'll be there to help them. And we'll talk more about that in depth in a little bit. But we're going to monitor the symptoms when they come in. We're going to check them in every day. They're going to go through a screening process. We're going to transport them on the bus using the guidance that we've got from NCDHHS and primarily the Strong Schools documentation that came through the state, to make sure that we're doing the things the state says. When the state says schools will, we're not taking that for granted. We're going to do those things to the very best of our ability 100% of the time. We're going to do what we're supposed to do in handling presumptive cases and positive cases of COVID-19. And the hard part is communication and combating misinformation. We want to make sure that we're putting the best information that we have as soon as we can in front of our stakeholders so that we can make the right decisions and err on the side of caution when we don't know we're going to fall on the side of caution. And that's how we're going to protect our vulnerable populations. We have certain people that work for us and certain people that come to school every day with something that puts them at an increased risk for complications due to COVID-19. And the last thing that we want to do is to put anybody in a situation to where they can't be successful as an employee or as a student. We're going to put processes in place to make sure that we're putting people in a position to be successful. Next slide, please. We have now sent out 2 parent surveys. We kind of guessed wrong maybe on that first one and thought that we might have the option of doing any of those things and kind of wanted to gauge all of it. And so we sent out a second one, but we felt like it was the right thing to do. We felt like it was vital to have data to plan for the coming school year. And we'll be sharing some of that data with you shortly about the things that we've had come in and the information that we've had put in front of us. Because we felt like for us to be able to open schools, we needed to have a certain amount of input from our families about what scares them. Some of the most important and some of the most heartfelt parts were not the boxes that they checked. It was the comments that they made. And we're spending time on those comments to come up with the FAQ and some other things so that we can make sure that we're answering the questions that are on the minds of our people that we serve, and that we are doing what we need to for our kids. All right, next slide, please. We've also sent a survey to all Swain County Schools employees to open a dialogue between the HR department, which is way more than just me, by the way, and our employees. Our goal is to meet the needs of our employees, but not at the expense of our students. We've got surveys, we're taking in their concerns. We want to honor them as much as we can. We're going to accommodate in every way that we can, every time that we can. But there's also a point in there where you may not be able to accommodate anymore. But we're going to be honest about that. We're going to open a dialogue and make sure that we're doing the very best we can for our kids and for our employees. Next slide, please. It's been said several times today. But remote learning plans, the feedback and student data from last year's remote learning has been analyzed, and we've talked about it. But one thing that everybody needs to make sure that they hear, if they don't hear anything else about remote learning, is that it is not going to be like it was last spring. The rigor will be much higher. Attendance and grades will be compiled for students, and a plan for curriculum delivery is nearing completion that is better suited for distance education. We did the best we could in the spring. We're proud of how we answered the adversity provided by this pandemic. I don't want to take, when I say that about saying it's going to be more rigor and we're going to do more, I don't want to make it sound like that we don't recognize and appreciate the way that our faculty stepped up last spring, because guys, we were light years ahead of 95%, maybe more than that, of the other LEAs that were answering that call. We were ahead of the game, and that was because of the leadership that was provided by Mr. Sale, and because also of the school people, the people that are running these schools. Our principals did a great job, and our teachers stepped up and said, well, this is what we got to do, so let's just fall in there and let's do it. And they went to work. And we have learned some things, and we're going to be better. But with that being better, that means the rigor is going to come up some. The expectations are higher. Anytime that you learn something new, you have to apply it. So the expectations are going to rise, and we don't want people to come into this thinking, well, I'm going to go ahead and take this option C because they didn't even take grades last time. It ain't that way. They need to know that. Next slide, please. We're providing all the things that were deemed as necessary by the DHHS guidelines for opening school. We're going to have hand sanitizers available everywhere. We've got enough hand sanitizers to float a battleship. The USS North Carolina could probably float on how much we've bought. I mean,
But it still won't be enough.
It won't be enough. And the other thing is it's getting down now to the delivery. I mean, you think about, all right, you get the hand sanitizer, and that's one thing, but now how are you going to get it on people's hands? Because the pumps you can get the hand sanitizer, but not the pumps, or this or that. It's an ongoing thing, and we're working our tails off to answer those questions, and we're on the front end of that. We have been proactive, and we've done a good job of having them in here. Cloth face coverings at first was going to be recommended. About this time last week, last Thursday evening, I guess about 3 o'clock, we opened up they had updated the Strong Schools guidance, and it was mandatory. And so we are still working through this process with an ever-changing, ever-evolving set of rules. And there may be something else shows up on this list. This is not the definitive list. Something may come up, something may fall off. People everywhere are doing the best they can with what we have to work with to be able to answer the need. We've got thermometers coming in that are touchless, where people are going to get when they get screened, they come in the building, everybody's going to get their temperature taken, everybody's going to answer some questions. It's going to be unlike anything we've ever done before, which, it's just a sign of the times. It's just what we're going to have to do. Next slide, please. All right, if you have any questions about this as we go through it, specific portions of the reopening plan that these guys are going to come through here, and I assume going to talk to as we go along. Cleaning and hygiene, speak to Toby Burl or Randy Arvey. Communication, Mr. Burl handles that. Employee health and safety and support, that's me in the HR department. Student screening and presumptive cases, Brandon Sutton. Remote learning plan, Miss Jody Marr. Social and emotional learning, Miss Trina Turbyfield. School nutrition, Miss Jennifer Brown. And our tech planning is going to come from Karen Cook. And all these people have devoted a tremendous amount of time to being prepared for this. But it's also of note that we have ever-changing guidance. And we're doing the best we can to stay on the front end of this wave. And we know parents and the community expect that, and we're going to answer that call. But we also want to request your patience in that we know that we may have to change the rules of the game. If the governor comes on TV and says on August the 24th that we're not going back to school next week, guess what? We're not going back to school next week. And that's not going to be our choice. But we've got to be prepared for if that happens and everything else that may come up as a result of that. So your patience and the patience of this community is appreciated, and thank you for giving me a minute.
Any questions for Tom?
I don't really have a question, but I'm gonna editorialize.
Okay.
Y'all knew I wouldn't get through a meeting without it. I will say that most conversations that I've had with parents have been very positive. But forever, whomever might be watching and or listening or might look at this at some later point, I just would encourage everyone in our community to realize that every staff person within our school system, every person that's involved in these decisions is a human being, just like the parent is. Most of you are parents, and every person in our school system is having to deal with this situation just the same as every parent is. And I think sometimes it's a little easy to overlook that because we look to our school system to have all the answers and to be, Johnny on the spot. And while all of you are engaging every bit of your emotional health and well-being and your mental capabilities and your intellect to put these plans together, you're still dealing with this crisis and this pandemic as a human being in your own family, with your own children. And so everything that's affecting every other community member is affecting our school staff. And I just would ask the public to keep that in mind and to know that as wonderful as you all are, none of you are superhuman beings. And so there may be some moments when it doesn't roll off your back as easily as it did yesterday. So anyway, just my little editorial statement on, let's just all try to be extremely supportive of each other and walk through this with a great deal of grace and mercy and kindness towards each other. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am. There's no job role within our school system, and I spend a great deal of time on this, going through this guidance, that is not touched in some way.
Exactly.
Everybody's mode of operations from every job, actually, but I can guarantee you in the school system, because I've looked at it from every direction that I know how, given the guidance, people's roles and your job is going to be expanded because of that. And it's part of the world that we're living in right now, but we're going to answer the bell. And we want to put everybody's mind at ease about that. We will answer the bell. We will do the best we can. We will keep showing up. We're not quitters. And we're going to do what's best for kids every day. And that's all we can promise. Thank you.
I'm going to think about this, trying to break it down as simple as I can. And tell me if I'm wrong on this 50% deal. If you got a normal class of 20, and 50% then takes it down to 10.
Not necessarily, because there's another caveat that goes into the description of how to determine who can be in a class. When the governor came out, was it this week that he made the announcement? When the governor came out this week, he focused on the second half of the social distancing element. There is a 50% square footage caveat there, and one would think that we could have 50% of our students there, and that's all. But there's also a 6-foot distancing element. And when he spoke on Tuesday, he never said anything about the square footage or the fire code limitations. He said 6-foot distancing. And we have heard that over and over and over as our guideline now. So what we have to look at in our classrooms is how can we maximize the space and and guarantee that students have 6-foot social distancing. So that's how we're basing it. And right now, we're thinking in an average classroom that we can probably get as many, hopefully, as 15 students in a class, depending upon the square footage of that room. So that would mean that a teacher who has 25 students really could have 15 if we use that 6-foot distancing piece, rather than just 12 or 12 and a half. I don't know how you'd have half a student, but you understand what I'm saying about that?
I do. It still comes down to, close to what I'm saying. If you had 25 and it's down to 15, then you're probably going to not have all those, because some of them will stay, 25% probably going to remote learn, right?
We're looking more like 30% right now from the
So
data, yes.
realistically, the
Yes.
classes are going to be fairly small.
Yes.
Plus, at the high school, how many additional classes you got? So that spreads out even more.
Yeah.
And then you factor in also the teachers that may qualify for accommodation, that are going to be serving in a different way. If you have some one-off teachers, it can make things extremely difficult about how to cover and how to do some things. But we're looking at it, and that's what I alluded to earlier, that we'd rather be right than fast. We want to take a look, make sure that we open a dialogue and make sure that teachers understand what we can do to protect them in the workplace and alleviate some of their concerns, and see how many we can get in. And then we can start making class lists, and that are going to stick. It's just going to be a process, and we're going to need everybody's patience while we work through it.
I got a question about the supplies, Tommy. You talked about plenty of hand sanitizer, stuff like that, but as far as like Clorox wipes, I know in the past, I mean, even years back, teachers had to buy their own. I mean, is that stuff going to be?
We can't buy what we can't get.
Right.
That's
what I'm asking.
And we haven't been able to do that, but we have another plan for how to do our surface cleaning that's going to go on within the classroom. And that really goes on further down into our presentation with some other people's stuff. But just, for instance, that a water and bleach substance, or a cleaning, I can't remember what that stuff was called, boss.
What, QT3?
QT3, that goes into a cleaner that you spray on the surfaces and you wipe everything down to where you don't have to worry about the Clorox wipes, because we're taking care of it in other means, because you can't buy enough Clorox wipes.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but we're having to come up with other things, and so that's what we're doing, is we're trying to find out, since some of those are roadblocks, how do we get around it?
I think that maybe one of the concerns there, though, I may be misinterpreting you, Travis, but is how much of the burden of the cleaning supplies and the materials is going to fall on the teachers themselves. And that's our goal. I don't know if Toby's going to cover this or not when he talks about cleaning, but we're going to use a different process of hard surface cleaning, and actually we're looking at a laundering service for towels, so that we don't have to, and we'll pay for that, so the teachers don't have to worry about that. Then we'll send that out every day, and it'll be laundered, and we'll get another batch. So every possible way that we can keep this out of the teachers' pockets, we're going to do that. I'm not sure, Jerry, that we totally addressed what you meant, though.
You did, I understand. Yeah, I'm saying it's not going to be, if people ask, it's not going to be the large class you're talking about. It's going to
No.
it'd be probably 50% overall.
And it may even be smaller than that.
It may be.
And you know, that's going to beg the question, well, then why can't you bring them all back? Because we have bus limitations.
Right.
We can put one student on a seat. And so, with all of that, I hate this mask. With all of that, I'm going to jerk this thing off. No, I'm not. I'm going to be a good role model. There you go. Yes, ma'am. With all of that, that's why we're taking our time.
Okay. Well, I'm very confident in what you're doing. You all put a lot of work and thought into it.
Now, I want us to move on a little bit, because I want to give you all an opportunity to ask Allison questions, because I like to see you put her on the spot. I'm just teasing you. I know that you are. I put an introduction together with to the reentry plan to just hit the highlights. Everything that's in the introduction you would see at the beginning of the reentry plan is going to be included in what these folks are going to say in just a few minutes, except for this. The first line of defense is in that first, no, is in the third paragraph. Our first line of defense is where it says, we ask that parents and guardians be alert to any COVID-like symptoms and keep children home if anyone in the house is showing signs of the illness. That is crucial, okay? And I know that in the past, what we've done, because I think I've done it, I figured that some of y'all have done it, we would give little Mark 2 Tylenol to pull his fever down and send him to school, right? And I understand that, but I don't know that that's a good practice right now,
Right.
okay? And so what I'm asking is for anybody that's listening, parents and guardians, do a pre-check before your kids leave the house. And if they've got a fever that's 100.4 or higher, keep them at the house. Don't worry about the attendance piece. We'll take care of that, all right? It'll be okay. If they've got a cough that is a real problem, keep them at the house until we can get that until they can get that taken care of. I can't stress that enough, and I think you all sense that. That's our first line of defense. Now, past that, I want Brandon to jump up here, and if you could give us just a few minutes and let Brandon go through these presumptive pieces and the entrances, because I think that's where people may have the most questions for you, okay?
So I was charged with putting together the presumptive, the screening pieces. Luckily, I had very little to do other than cut and paste from state documents. So we have to screen everyone that enters our building. There's 3 questions, and there has to have their temperature taken. So parents are gonna have to be patient with us at parent drop-off. We're gonna have to ask you questions about your child every day. We're gonna have to take your child's temperature every day.
Can I ask a question? Like for children that board the buses, how do you ask those questions?
Well,
Because
we're gonna ask that parents help us there.
okay.
There's a parent attestation that can send home, but parents if you send your child to the bus stop,
Then you're
please have screened them.
Yeah,
They will have
okay.
their temperature taken. Now, an older child, we can ask.
You can ask. I was thinking.
But, the
younger
little
ones,
guys,
yeah.
we can't. Even the guidance says that, if for something happens and a little student ends up at our door with no parent, it's the teacher's judgment. Can this student respond accurately to this questions? We're still taking the temperature, though. So everyone has to be screened before they enter our building. Visitors, we're going to ask, you're going to have to be screened. There's the 3 questions. If you answer yes to any of them, you cannot enter our building. There's guidance as to what you have to do to come back, depending on the different things. So those were all given to us from the state. I looked at it's a big document, and I wanted to cut it down to try to make it a little bit more friendly for our staff that is going to have to work through these, but there's just no way. Inside the document, there are protocols for multiple situations. So a student arrives at the door and he screens positive. How does the staff respond? How do you exclusion? What are we going to do to get the student off? Away from everybody? How do you control the infection? What pieces we got to stake? Transportation. How's this kid getting home? How's this staff member getting home? Notification. Making sure we're notifying the health department, parents, other staff, administration. Cleaning. How do you properly clean for the situation? And there's multiple situations in here, so there was no way to cut these out. And then there's closure. So if we have some, like closing off a space, if a student was to get sick during the day and start running a 100.4, we have to close that classroom for up to 48 hours before we can let people back in, and it's got to be properly cleaned. The cleaning guidelines are outlined in here. And then what if we have to work with the health department if we do have a positive case? You know, what are the steps to address the other students that may be around? But the screening is the big part, trying to ensure that there's protecting our students and our staff as much as possible to prevent the spread of the COVID-19, which is a big deal, and it's a lot. We're going to have staff with thermometers and the questionnaires at parent drop-off, at the doors as people enter, and we're going to ask them that if there's a positive screening, you turn that positive screening into the school nurse. They follow the proper protocol. That proper protocol is going to be signed and dated by the principal, saying that every step was followed. And then there's another form that you document the time. So if I screen positive and I've got a 100.4 temperature, but I don't go get a test, I've got to be out 14 days. If I go get tested and it's negative, there's another timeline. If I go get tested and it's not COVID, but I have strep throat, we have to follow, there's other guidelines for coming back into school, and that's all outlined in this document. I think I covered all that. Each school has to have an isolation room so that if any staff member or student gets sick, we remove them from the student body and hold them until someone is able to come pick them up.
And if someone is not able to come and pick up a student, there is a protocol for us to follow,
Yeah.
which includes not putting that student on the bus,
Yeah.
but using an alternate mode of transportation.
Yeah.
Correct, Toby?
You got two brothers, two sisters, brother and a sister, one of them has a temperature, one of them does not. There's so many scenarios I know.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to ask to play it safe. So if, one student's got a 100.4, that's a potential exposure. Please keep all your students
Yes.
home. And that's the reason you have to have that remote learning plan at the ready. Because you may get sick. We're going to hit strep throat season at some point in time, and we're going to have some temperatures, and we're going to have to be cautious. So you have to have that so that if a student has to quarantine or has to miss 14 days of school, they are still learning. They're not just sitting at home absent. We have to have that plan in place, ready to go on the drop of a hat. Any questions about this? I have worked with Carol Shell to outline this. We're going to train teachers. School nurses are going to train teachers and staff about proper hand washing, the mask wearing. We're going to take the teachers and train students, train about the signs and symptoms of COVID-19 so we can all be vigilant and be ready. We're going to have signage at our door saying, please do not enter if you answer yes to any one of these questions. Trying to do our best and take all the recommended steps to prevent and slow the spread of this and keep our students and staff safe, because it is our goal to get them in the building as much as possible.
And I think it's important for us to add also, Brandon, that even though a lot of our minds are on Plan B right now, what Brandon is describing is not Plan B, it's Plan A. If we pull all the students into school, we're still going to use these same procedures. The primary difference in Plan A and Plan B is the 50% social distancing element, okay? So when we come back to Plan A, and we will someday, I'm satisfied, we'll still be doing the same thing, only with more students at the same time.
Yeah, and each school has a plan that lists like just daily procedures, the flow of traffic in the hall, so we can social distance in the hallway. They're changing how you get to and from different spots. Several different guidance for individual schools to ensure that social distancing and screening processes. They have to identify what staff's going to be out front screening as kids come, where are we going to screen the students that get off the bus with the thermometer. How do we screen visitors all day long? So we're going to trust that if they see that sign, that we can trust them to say, oh, look, I've done this. I cannot enter in this school, so I'm just going to use the intercom to work with the school secretaries.
And the principals at each of the schools have already taken everything that Brandon has been talking about, and they have developed routines. And so on that document that I shared with you all today, though there are links for each school, Bright Adventures all the way to the high school. I would encourage you between now and next Thursday, when we meet again to talk about this, to go through those and look at the steps that have already been outlined in detail. But as you look at these things, understand that this is a working document. Nothing is in stone yet. And even once we get ourselves to a place where we feel like we have all the pieces in place to move forward, there will still be adjustments, because every time we turn over a rock with this, we find two more.
We had all these printed for the go out to the schools, and the day that Lavonda printed them, they updated it, and you have the not so pretty updated version is the one you have. They changed just a few things on us, so we had to go back and update it.
While we were talking here, I got a ding on my computer, and DPI just sent an update on their guidance tonight. So, yeah. Knew it was coming. Now, Allison, is there anything that you want to add? Any thoughts? Any guidance for us? You don't have to.
I would just say that the document that he has presented will change.
Oh, absolutely.
I anticipate the state coming back and saying if a child is negative and that class has worn masks, that they do not have to quarantine for 14 days. That's what I anticipate. So just know that what you have is a fluid document, and it will change daily. And, you know, parents need to know that it changes daily and has from the beginning. Because when we first had COVID, we had to, you know, basically screen people that were positive 14 days prior and 14 days up until that afterwards. But now it's, if you're positive, it's 48 hours prior till that test date, who you've been in contact with. So it's changed dramatically from beginning until now, and it will continue to change.
I guess, and again, I understand that things change all the time. I'm puzzled about, and I know you didn't make a statement, but that, I mean, this is the directive that's been given, that where it says public staff will share that close contacts testing negative will still need to complete the 14 original day quarantine.
Yes, that's
And I know that's
because-
across the board. That's not just in school systems, but that just puzzles me. I don't quite follow that
Well, the
logic.
tests are not 100% accurate, and the virus may take longer than day 7 of your test date to manifest and show. You may not have symptoms till day 13 or 14.
Okay,
So that is why.
okay. Well, that makes sense. Thank you.
Especially if you're asymptomatic. That's why.
Anyone have any questions for Allison, because she stayed 25 minutes past her target?
Quite all right.
Anybody?
Any other questions?
There'll be a lot of questions. I'll do my best to answer them,
Yeah.
so.
As we go
But I've been
through
working with everybody here, so
Great.
it's been going great.
Thank you. Thank you so much
As
for
we go
doing
through the
that.
evening, if we have more questions, we'll bring them to you. And
Yeah.
if you could pencil us in for next Thursday at 6,
Okay,
we're going to have a special meeting just for this purpose.
okay, here.
Yes. No, it'll be downstairs.
Thursday.
Yeah, 23rd. No, the commissioners are up here. We'll be downstairs.
Okay, not a problem.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, very much. Now, we've already talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that we haven't spoken about is how is this going to impact food and nutrition? So I'd ask Jennifer to come
Can
in,
you eat?
because it will have an impact.
Absolutely it will, because that's one of the transmission
Mm-hmm.
routes of transmission.
Okay, so first I'll just talk about how we're going to do the food delivery. So it's going to be done a little bit differently depending on which schools we're at. So at the elementary levels, we're going to be delivering the food to the classrooms, either to the classrooms or to like hallway zones.
And we're used to doing this because we do breakfast in the classroom. We've been doing that for years. So we kind of have that down at the elementary level. We don't do it for lunch, so that's going to be new for us. At the middle school, we are going to set up some kiosks for breakfast that kids can come in, grab their breakfast, and take it to the classroom as they come in. So we'll probably have one like in the downstairs area and then one upstairs somewhere. We're probably going to kind of play around with. We don't want them to, all congregate in one area. So, but like Mr. Kerr pointed out, they're going to be naturally. The way that they come in is going to be naturally spaced because of the screening process. So that should help with that. Now at the high school, it's going to be more of a grab and go for both breakfast and lunch. So they'll either come down to the cafeteria or we'll have a kiosk probably somewhere else in the cafeteria. I've purchased 4 kiosks, which are like kind of big serving counters that can be rolled to different areas in each school to set up an auxiliary serving area. And then at the high school, they'll go to different areas to eat, and there'll probably be a little bit more intermingling, but at all the other schools, they'll be, in their classroom pods for eating. Let's see. In terms of, we'd still want to maintain where the kids get a choice of entrees. So with the grab and go stations, they'll still be able to kind of pick and choose. But with the lunches, we're going to set up an ordering system where when they come in the morning, they can pick between like entree A, B, or C, so that they'll still get that variety. I'm looking at, in terms of like lunch, we're still going to be able to do like hot meals to the classrooms. We're looking at purchasing a tray sealing device at each school so that the food can be put on the tray, sealed, and then, they just pull the plastic off. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of new equipment we're having to purchase for this. In terms of cafeteria staff, we're going to do do a specific training with them on all the COVID-related stuff, sanitizing, cleaning, social distancing, mask wearing, all of that. The other thing that I just wanted to let y'all know about is that over the summer we have been operating under it's called the SFSP program, the Summer Food Service Program. And that program is, we are allowed to run that program through August 31st right now. That program is the area eligible program where all kids eat free. So the first 2 weeks of school, we'll be able to continue that as of now. So all kids will eat for free. And we won't have to, like right in the normal school year, we have to pull up each kid and ring them in for their meal. So it's going to be a lot easier if we just have to do a count and we don't have to, because we don't have to decide, does this kid pay or this kid not. They are putting in, they have US or the NC and North Carolina has requested that that program be extended through December 31st. And I feel pretty confident that they will do that. So hopefully that program will be able to be continued through the year and possibly longer. So we're really hoping for that. That would really help our accounting process. Let's see. We'll be able to continue our after-school meal programs as we had in the past, that we'll still be able to do a probably like a grab and go wherever they're going. I'm not sure how what after school's gonna look like right now.
We'll talk about that.
Now, in terms of our remote students, we are allowed to provide them meals, but we have not gotten into the details on how we're going to do that yet. Some ideas are that we send meals home on the days that they are in school. We send meals home with them for the next day or two, because we've been doing that, this summer, like with our buses, we'll send weekend meals. So that's a possibility. I guess another possibility might be, having bus routes run. I'm just not really sure what we're going to do there yet, but we are going to be able to provide the meals. And then that's basically, one other thing that they did approve is if we do have to go back to the National School Lunch Program and not the special program, the state is going to pay for all reduced price lunch meals. In the past, they paid for the breakfast meals, and now they're going to pay for breakfast and lunch for this school year. So, but hopefully we won't have to go back to that program, at least for a little while. So, any questions for me?
Because we're serving lunch in rooms, and breakfast in rooms, and we have additional cleaning concerns in the rooms and the hallways and the bathrooms and everywhere, we are anticipating that we're going to hire 4 more custodians for the year, so that doesn't fall on teachers any more than it has to. There may be some cleaning pieces in the classrooms that teachers will need to help us with, particularly for hard surfaces, but we're going to provide the resources for that, like I've been talking about. And they don't have to be spotless, but a couple of times a day, just hit the surfaces. So that's going to be an added expense, and I'm glad that Stephanie's on vacation because she doesn't know that yet. And if she's watching, surprise. Bright Adventures doesn't have a full-time nurse, and we feel like that it's really important that during this time period where we're having to do temperature screenings and we've got additional concerns, that we have somebody there who has a health certification of some sort. So we're looking for a CNA to put there full-time. Again, an extra cost. People have, they assume that we've gotten all this money from the federal CARES Act, and we did get a good substantial sum, somewhere around $360,000. But by the time that you put all of these things together and then you look at what it's going to cost to buy this program, we've just entered into our fund balance. So this will impact our finances, but I'm confident that Stephanie is a great gardener and that she will be able to manicure and trim the money trees so that they produce more fruit without any doubt.
How does this affect our remote learning? I mean, I know last year when we was doing that, we had to furnish lunches, breakfast. I mean,
if we go to Plan C, full remote learning, I don't know that we'll be able to continue doing that unless someone comes through like they have this year and supply that opportunity.
But the ones that decide to do the remote learning right now, we don't have to.
No,
Gotcha.
and it's pure economics. I don't know that we have the ability to provide lunches for people who choose the remote learning.
I think that we are allowed to do that. Now, how we get that to them, we don't have the funding to deliver those right now, unless we came up with an innovative way of, or somehow that the buses are already out that way. I don't know, but we are allowed to.
Okay, I don't know that I was aware of that.
Yeah.
So that's something that we can look into. But then somehow we're going to have to pay for fuel and the driver, and you really have to have somebody who can assist them to deliver. And we're able to do that now, and we have been able to through the spring by using additional staff that were not in the classroom. So we'll look at that, Travis, and we'll see if we can develop an idea of a plan if we can do that by next week. Okay? So you're going to have to help me remember that there, Sunshine.
It's on my list.
Any questions for Jennifer? Okay. We've already covered a lot of other things here, remote learning, presumptive. Tricia's not here. She's on vacation. I'll have her here next week to talk about the pre-K, because pre-K is a little different. They don't operate within the same guidelines that we do in the kindergarten through 12th grade, and she needs to explain that to you. Neil is here to talk about athletics, and I'll follow up with how that's going to affect other extracurriculars as well. Okay?
Well, Tuesday, when the governor finally told us what plan we're gonna be on, the B plan, the High School Athletic Association, we met that night on a meet when we went from probably about 7 to 9:30 to come up with our plan. And that is, we are extending the start time to no earlier till September 1st. That doesn't mean it's starting September 1st, but it won't start before that. And there are a couple reasons, there's a lot of different reasons for that. One, as long as we're in phase 2, we can't have all our people together, so you can't really practice. So you really couldn't start then, and you can't have large gatherings, so you couldn't start games. So that was one of the main factors. The other thing is we're going to send out next week or the week after, once the superintendents have time to look at Plan B and what plan they're going to be using, they're going to get a survey that asks if they can play sports in that plan. You can play sports. It's just up to whether or not you can pull it off in your area. Some areas are not going to be able to pull it off. Some areas can. Some areas, their middle school and high school are going to be remote, all of them. And their elementary kids are going to be there every day. But they still can play sports. That will be up to the superintendents. They'll make that decision. Then we'll get that survey back and we'll find out how many schools are going to be able to play sports. And once we get that, then we'll be able to see what our plan is. There's a lot of different questions that we have to answer in that. And the fact of, one, we've got kids that are not going to be here at school every day. We're going to have to find ways to get them to practice. So whether that's us driving buses to go get them and running bus routes for practices, we've already started talking to our coaches and trying to find out how many of those kids that could be through our workouts and the people who are working out with kids. But it's going to probably affect more of your middle school and your JV programs. So if a kid is remote learning, he can still participate if they choose to, because they're still under our school system. So they can do that. Now, if they choose to go to a different LEA and take a class that way in remote learning, then they cannot. So, you know, there's a lot of different things we have to look at with it. There's also the answer of how we're going to handle if a kid does have COVID. You know, all of a sudden you're having to forfeit games. The High School Athletic Association has plans pushed all the way. If we start here, this is how many games we're going to have. If we start here, this is how many games we're going to have. If it was to get pushed, there's been a lot of rumors about flipping spring to the fall. It makes sense, but then it doesn't make sense. The first thing is sports medicine committees, a lot of them are not going to allow us to play football in the spring, then to turn around and have summer workouts and go right back at it in the fall. Just because of the physicality of football. And then they're also not going to, people don't think of this either, is if we move them to spring sports to the fall, and all of a sudden cases start to rise again, and the governor says we're shutting down again, now the spring sports have lost 2 seasons in a row. So you don't want to do that either. So there's a lot of things you have to look at when you do this, and we've got all kinds of different plans to go with it, but it's just a matter of putting it all together, and we find out how many schools can and cannot play. Because the biggest worry is if a county says, no, they can't play, and the county beside them is playing, we see it as athletes leaving, superintendents see it as dollar figures leaving. And that could happen. There's still, I think there's 9 counties right now that aren't doing any workouts right now. Some of them, one of them has 35 high schools in it, and one of them has 18 high schools in it. So that's quite a bit of high schools right there that they're not even doing anything yet. So we've got a lot of things to answer. As of right now, we are going to stay with our workout program the way we're doing it. We are looking to go into phase 2 of our workout plan, where hopefully we'll be able to start adding a ball. Still no body-to-body contact, but they are looking at starting out at a ball. And we will not be able to go into a weight room until the governor opens weight rooms across the state. So our workout program for the summer has gone well. We've tested them all as they've come through. I think we've sent 6 off to be tested that had contact, and thank goodness they've all came back negative. But our coaches have done a good job of screening them and keeping the thing clean, keeping stuff clean and doing that. So, and they've done a great job if they have questions of contacting me and asking what they should do. And it's just like with the school stuff, if there's a question about whether they should come, we most time tell them to stay home. So that's where we're at. You got any questions?
Any possibility of when you'll be able to use that facility? I looked at that one the other day. Boy, we thought it was just a metal building. It has turned out fabulous.
It is a beautiful building, and we are ready at the High School Athletic Association to, once the governor allows the regular weight rooms to open in the state, then we'll be able to open ours. Now, we'll still have to go by the 10 rule, because that's what it is right now. It's 10. And so we have to get out of that stage before a lot can happen with athletics and anything. So some things we've got to think about, our buses, when we travel, if you have to put one per seat, it just got real complicated on ball game nights. It's going to be tough. And right now, you know, I don't know how that's going to look. And another issue is, you know, we talked about, in order for me to think, you know, you talk about money, because that's what runs this show, is we need 4 home games, I think, for us to be in the positive. Because we've already got bills. We got a paint bill, we got a Rydell bill, we've got bills already out there that we have to do in the spring. So those are already out there, but I think you got to have 4 home games. Now, the biggest problem we got right now is, if you look at the date of September 1st, our first 4 games, 3 of them are at home. 2 of them are pretty big money makers that we're probably going to lose at least a couple of them. So.
You said September 1st, is that?
That's the earliest. That doesn't say we're starting in. That's just the earliest. And all this is going to affect each season. Seasons are going to be smaller. Playoff rounds are going to be, there will be fewer teams making the playoffs. We even got things like, if you don't make the playoff, that you're allowed to play 1 extra game as a bowl game. We're looking at stuff like that for money making. You know, just so that we can try to make some money and revenue. Because the biggest worry right now across for ADs is the money. We're going to have to do some things probably for plexiglass for our ticket takers. I was just talking to Allison about concession stands. They even started hitting that yet. So there's a lot of questions to answer before we even able to get started. But with us knowing now that we are on the B plan, at least lets us get a start and look at things. And then once we get the thing from the superintendent, whether or not your area can play, then we'll go from there. Any other questions?
The other extracurriculars, which would include band, and I haven't had a conversation with our cheerleader coaches yet about what their thoughts are. Their cheerleaders are going to fall underneath High School Athletic Association guidelines. Band does not. I would encourage you to look at what Karen has put in from the High School Band Association. They have a really good plan in place. They're going to try to have as much of a marching season as they possibly can. They still, I think, have some hope to maybe go to some competitions, maybe, but that's fairly iffy as well. But I would encourage you to look at that. You have any questions about the extracurricular piece?
Is all the fall sports falling in that same, like volleyball and?
Yeah, because, and people don't think about this either. You know, you look at all the sports and you say, well, they could run cross country. Well, you think about all the kids that go to a cross country race for your event, you go 6 feet apart. You got to have a pretty big field to pull that off. You're going to have to look at staggered starts and doing stuff like that with that. Volleyball, they thought that was good, but you think about all the net play that's up there and everything that's into the net. So that becomes into an area too. You know, and I mean, we ain't even got into wrestling. I mean, in the winter, you wait till you get to indoor sports and you tie the flu to it. I mean, it's going to be crazy. I mean, we've talked about with High School Athletic Association, the swimming, the indoor track. There's all kinds of things that, it's going to be a tough year. And it's going to take a lot of planning. But the High School Athletic Association, they've done a great job. They've got plans ready. It's just a matter of fact of them trying to work with the governor and even though he kind of threw us under the bus the other day whenever the person asked a question about athletics. We've been waiting on them, and he told us it's our plan. So we're going to come up with a plan, and then once we'll be ready to go. So.
Ken, you had a question?
And I hope I'm not asking something that's already been answered, because it was a little spotty there for a little bit. But, so even if the teams can't or don't compete with other schools in a traditional setting, I noticed in the plan where it talks about, and one is just wrestling, where wrestlers can still make drill without touching the other inmate and things like that. Is there a plan for the students to be able to continue to practice, and I'm using that to quote, in accordance with whatever the plan is, even if there's little or no competition with other schools?
There'll be no really official practice until they tell us that we can start playing. We'll be able to continue workouts. Is that what she's asking? Yes. Because we can't really practice until they allow us to have body-to-body contact, and that's all sports. I mean, soccer's got body-to-body. You know, you're going to be able to get closer than 6 feet before you can practice, consider practicing. So they can continue to work out. You know, and the next phase for workouts is trying to get a ball involved where they can pass the ball. You know, right now at soccer, they got to keep the same ball, and you got to shoot the same ball. You got to go get your own ball. So you can't really do anything. You know, in football, we can't even have a football. So once we will start official practices, then all this stuff about body to body, that has to be gone for us to even consider starting. So I think once that stuff's gone, then that's when we'll be able to start. You know, and that's what you have to see. And I guess the frustrating part for coaches and kids is the fact that you see other states starting. You know, our biggest worry in North Carolina are kids leaving. And in boarding states, that's going to happen. You know, but, you know, parents got to take care of kids too. But it could happen. But right now, I know Virginia's pushed football. I think Tennessee's going to their start date's going to change. South Carolina's start date's going to change. Right now, I think Georgia's the only one who is staying right now with theirs. I think they're the only one right now. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it was just, yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we're going to keep moving on. Thank you, Coach. Brandon and Katrina are going to talk about the social emotional supports that were given to students and also to staff. So let's move on. Thank you.
So one of the things that's required is for us to have a crisis intervention plan. So to address student anxiety, staff anxiety. So I met with the counselors at every school, gave up a day, a couple hours last week, and we created a crisis intervention response protocol that just outlines if a student shows anxiety, the steps to connect them to the right people. It included some phone numbers because we're going to make this available to parents also. So if, you know, a student is struggling at home and they need help, it has some numbers to some local providers. I think it's 211 for the state number to reach out. So we worked with them. They will be training staff when we return on this protocol and then on signs of anxiety, depression, and those types of things. So to keep an eye out for the mental health of our students and our staff at this point in time. And we'll be releasing some information to parents so they know the signs. And because we've got some local providers, Appalachian, Meridian, and then there's some tribal providers, some providers on the reservation on the boundary that can help also. So we're going to release those numbers and make this available for people to see. And then the other thing that was included in there is just on the next, going back to that agenda page, was our grief response plan, just in case that's needed. We're going to hope and pray that that's just a waste of paper and time right there creating that, but we had to have a plan in place in case an emergency happened. And those were, again, the counselors gave up several hours of their summer to help put this plan in place.
I don't know if you got a chance to look at any of those yet because you just got that documentation, but I would encourage you to look at those over the next week. And we'll put those out into the public so that they'll see that we really are concerned about the whole child. And it goes to our staff too. Do you have any questions, Brandon? Katrina?
Like Mr. Sell said, we are concerned about our students, every part of their lives and our staff. And so Brandon's been really working on the more supplemental and intensive care that our staff and students are going to need. I just worked on like the core, what we're going to do for every kid and every student and every teacher. So of course we're going to do our Leader in Me lessons. We're going to continue with that. That's important. That's an important part of social emotional learning. And we're going to continue with that. We're going to make sure that those students are greeted when they come in. Now, a lot of teachers have different greetings that they're doing, and so they're having to change those so they're not touching. So that's a big difference for them. So they're having to rethink how they greet those children in the morning. We want to make sure that we allow our students to express their feelings, whether that's through drawing, through writing, just talking, that they have the opportunity to do that. One thing that Castle recommends, and I don't know if you're familiar with Castle or not, but they're one of the most trusted authorities on social emotional learning. They recommend 3 signature SEL practices: a welcoming activity, engaging strategies, and then an optimistic closure. And that we're going to expect that in the classroom every day so that everybody feels welcome when they come in. We're going to engage them all day long, give them some brain breaks along the way, and then we're going to finish out the day on a high note. And not only with our students, but with our staff too, with our staff meetings and those kind of things. We're going to expect that for them too. We want to make sure that we're still building relationships with students. And there's research that shows the 2 times 10 strategy, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but spend 2 minutes a day for 10 days with anybody and you build a relationship. And it doesn't mean you're talking about school. It means I'm talking about what'd you do at home last night, what'd you have for dinner, and those kind of things. What do you need help with? And we want to make sure we're building those strong relationships because our students and staff are going to need those. Castle gives a bunch of really great ideas to do with children, to use with children, to make sure that we acknowledge that they feel worried and they feel scared. Just to let them know we understand that they may have some anxiety. And also to make sure that we engage them in conversations that is appropriate for their age about COVID. You know, it's okay to talk about it. It's the elephant in the room, so we might as well talk about it. And just make sure we're talking about it appropriately. Providing consistent routines. That's going to be so important for our students because, you know, they've not had that for a while. And we want to make sure we're doing that for them. And then also consistent communication with our families so they know what we're doing, what's going on in the classrooms, because that's going to ease our anxiety of our students if the families know what's going on. And then also with our and we want to make sure we share with parents too some of the helplines and things that Brandon has already collated so that they know where to call if they need help too, because they may not come to us. We want them to have the opportunity to have that. We want to make sure that our teachers know the resilience resets, the strategies for that, so we can reset those kids when they get upset, you know, just like taking a deep breath, getting a drink of water, those kind of things. And that our staff are using them themselves because they're going to need it. So we're going to have to revisit those, bring those back out again. And for our staff to make sure that they're taking brain breaks through the day. Because they're going to have a lot on their shoulders, and we know that. And so we need to provide opportunity for that. We want to encourage them to sharpen the saw, whether that's through some kind of challenge in the school system, something to keep them, what are you doing to sharpen your saw? And also maybe providing a room where they can be socially distanced but exercise together or do a book club or something, so that we're providing the facilities for that. And again, using those same signature SEL practices, the welcoming activity, the engaging strategies, and the optimistic closure with our staff. And also just letting them know that, you know, they need to take care of themselves. It's kind of like on the airplane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help anybody else. Our staff needs to do that for themselves. If they need to have grief, they need to grieve, you know, if they need not acknowledge that. Yeah, us too. Stay in the present. Separate what they cannot control and what they can control. Really think about those things, but take care of themselves so that they can help our students. Any questions about that?
Great. Very thorough, thank you.
Thank you.
What I'm trying to do is to show you and the public, if they're paying attention to this, that we really are doing everything that we can to cover every area coming back to school. Now, Tommy's going to talk about some of the pieces that have to do with staff, and in the process, he's also going to show some data from the surveys, and I think that you're going to really want to see that, and I really want our community to see that as well. As you're looking at it, and you see some of the numbers that we're getting back from the surveys, you're going to begin to understand more and more why I am so committed to getting the students back into the classrooms. Even though there may be some around us who are pushing us to go to Plan C right now, our community is overwhelmingly saying they want their students in the schools. And I feel like we have to respond to that, to our best ability. So, Tommy, please.
Okay. I'm going to jump in first on the employee health and safety pieces of this. I wanted to touch on this real quick. Some of the things that we're doing to try to mitigate the risk for our people as they come into the buildings. And there's going to be touched on, that's the part about my piece of this synthesizes a lot of different people's pieces of this plan, because you can't talk about any of this stuff about stakeholder risk without talking about cleanliness and hygiene. And that's what Mr. Burrows will speak to y'all about in a little bit later too. But clean and sanitize buildings, that's one of the things that we're going to do. We're going to be committed to. We're going to put new protocols in place. Stakeholder responsibilities. You know, we're trying to model what we expect from other people. Wearing the mask, being socially distant, making sure that we are doing what we're supposed to do to make sure that people understand that we're going to try to help them be safe. We're limiting non-essential visitation. People aren't just going to come in and out of the buildings just for no good reason anymore, because we just can't take the risk of what they bring in with them. Our staff expectations, as I alluded to earlier, there is no part of the roles that our people have, that we have, that anybody in our society has, that's not been touched by this. And we're going to all have to pitch in together to do the best we can. And we're going to have to do that with the knowledge of, and I'm going to address what I consider to be the elephant in the room, is that you can mitigate the risk, but you can't alleviate the risk. Because, guys, there's a risk associated with every single thing that we decide to do with every little facet of our lives. We're doing things to try to mitigate that risk because we care about each other. I'm wearing this mask not for me. I'm wearing this mask for other people. I mean, they probably wish it had come a long time ago. I'm probably prettier with the marvels on my face right here, but we're doing this to mitigate other people's risk. We're not doing this for any other reason other than that, but there is a risk associated. We're going to have to be honest about that with everything that we decide to do, no matter what. If it's getting in the car, walking across the street, there's a risk associated. All right, daily operations going to be touched on. We've talked about some of that already, about the screenings and one thing and another. But I wanted to touch down here at the bottom, the last, about talking about the support, protecting vulnerable populations. We got to know who's at elevated risk. Who are the people in our buildings that are at elevated risk? We're going to review the health plans of the people that we know are at elevated risk. We've already done a staff identification process of people that, guys, if you know that there's something that puts you at an elevated risk, we put it out there. We've got some of that data. I'm going to share that with you in a minute. Coping and resilience. We're making sure people understand that it's okay to feel however it is that you feel. And we're here to support you as much as we possibly can. We got some staff leave options that are new, federal emergency FMLA, and just liberal use of the employee sick leave. Sick may be just being, even if I had to go home for 3 days because I had to go get tested or whatever. That's employee sick leave. We've got some things that apply to that, so it won't take off their leave totals, and we're going to do our very best to help our people. And now I'm gonna jump into the data. And whoop. Swain County Public Schools reopening survey results. Now, this does not mean this is all the results because they're still rolling in. This is a live document. The things that LaVonda put together with this, I told her this is what I needed to do, and she and Michelle Herron went to work. I'm pretty good with Excel. I'm pretty good with some of that stuff, but I can't hold a candle. It's unbelievable the way some of those. The way some of the stuff came in. And this stuff it's populating all the time. We had to print something. So here we go. As of 4:40 this afternoon, these results is what we had. 813 students had been spoken for. All right. 83.7% said they wanted a blended or a hybrid option, and 16.3 were full remote. That's in contrast to what we had seen in some of our others, so it's hard to see exactly where this is all going to land. I think that what our stakeholders are asking for is every bit as fluid as our guidance has been. It may end up being 30, it's going to be at least, I'd say 20 by the time it's all said and done, but the bottom line is we're going to do what we need to do to provide for our kids the best we possibly can. And that the people, 813 students, is a representation of about 43% of our anticipated student population. So that's pretty good. The parent survey results, the total number of students by school who have responded. Bright Adventures typically, 106 seats, is that right? And we've got 46 people coming into that, so that's probably about 44%, which is about where we're at across the board. 44.3% of East Elementary's population approximately has responded, 47.4% of West, 38.6% of the middle school, and 43% of the high school. There are the numbers. Parent survey results, just the total number of students by grade. We've gotten, I've been surprised by some of this. I felt like that probably that child care responsibilities and the inability to provide child care for their children would push a whole lot more kids into the K5 and the K5 range into at least a B or an A if we had it. That's not what happened. It's not what happened. There were some hypotheses that I felt like made sense, and we asked the questions because the hypothesis is just that. We needed to know what was going on, and we have a pretty good representation of how many people per grade. And so if we double these numbers, which that'd be kind of what you'd think, we're going to be able to plan. But that's why this is important, and it's why if people are out there right now and they're listening to what we're saying, but they haven't replied to the survey yet, because I replied to that one before. We didn't know that A was going to go off the table. It did. So now it's either B or C, and we're going to have to, at some point, come up with a process for getting people to let us know what's your final answer. And it's going to stick for a while, because we can't go from C to, if I said I'm going to be C all the time, it's going to be hard to go from C to B. We have to plan for that and to help our students and our faculty. Yes. Okay.
Okay, there is going to have to be a point where the data prediction stops and people put their name on the line. Yeah. And that's going to happen, that's going to start happening next week. So we're doing our best with all of these numbers to determine what B is going to look like. And I'll tell you that the numbers that Tommy is showing you now as a 440, okay, are different than the numbers that I saw this morning at 10 o'clock.
Because it was a third then.
It was a third. Okay, so things have shifted some, which is really interesting to me. And so I want to make two statements here. The first is the community, if you have not responded to the survey, we need to know. And the second thing is, be prepared next week for a commitment to be asked of you, so that we can actually do our planning, because we'll use those numbers that come to us, and then we have to determine how we're going to run bus routes. That's the second player in this that people just don't understand. And from the bus routes, we determine who's going to be in what classrooms. Okay? It's that process. So we need the community to help us and give us some insight, all right? Thank you, Tom.
Yes, that's no problem. And the bottom line is that also for our teachers, there's some of our teachers who can't be in the traditional classroom. And we have to provide for them the opportunity to do what they need to do for themselves. And some of that will be taking care of these kids who don't feel comfortable or can't be in that situation either. But we have to be prepared to care for everybody. We have to know where we're standing and why, even down to building class lists. Even down to building class lists, because we can't build a class list and put somebody in second grade on a class list for somebody's going to be teaching the B side of this equation, and then them say, well, no, I'm just going to do C. That's going to make it harder on us, because you want to keep your class lists even. You know, there's a process to this, and we really need to have accurate data and timely as much as we possibly can. All right. The next one is parent survey results for East Elementary. We've got, here it is. A lot of kindergarten kids, you know, there's 17 so far that have said that they're coming, 3 that say they're going to go to remote. We got 19 that are coming to first grade and 7 that are saying that they're going to go to remote. One of those 19 right there is mine. 23 that are going to come to school as much as they can, and 4 that say that I'm going to need you to provide for me. Otherwise, I'll out down through there. But that's what we've got, and we have tables that are set up that it is updating all the time, so we'll be able to more easily track it. Parent survey results for West. A lot of kindergarten people have already responded, and that's pretty natural, because I think they're into this, and it's like, you know what, this may be, you know, this is their first step, and they've responded, and that's great. And then we've got the parent survey results for transportation.
This is important. Do your best to see it. I know that it's a little far away.
The numbers are vital for our planning, for rosters and calculating and all kinds of different stuff. 52% of our folks have said that they are going to be parent drop-off kids, that we're just going to bring them to school. We're going to avoid this whole bus thing. And then we've got a group of kids who are bus on PM only.
These numbers are crucial, because normally what we'll see is a lower number of students that ride in the morning and a higher number in the afternoon. And these numbers are going to be impacted by the after-school and extracurricular offerings, okay? And we were really concerned about that aspect. In the first week of school, very often when I was at the middle school as principal, the first week of school, we were having to adjust people on buses while they sat there because they were overloading. But then whenever the after-school program started, it settled back down and we could get them back into a regular routine. These numbers are critical. So what are our numbers for students who are going to be riding afternoon total? Afternoon total,
Bus to and from school is about 35% of the people that have surveyed so far.
So you're looking, if that's true, then, well, you can do the math. If you were to build 35% on 2,000 students, you know, you're looking at about 700 students at that point. And we have to figure out, how are we going to get all of them on a bus, 1 student per seat?
On 22 buses. 22 bus routes. That's correct, isn't it? 22 bus routes. And we've got to figure out how to get 700 kids a day home on 22 buses into communities that are a long ways apart.
I was going to say, I mean, some of those routes under normal circumstances are very long routes, and
you know what, Jerry, my numbers were wrong. Because if we took 20% off of that, that's 400, that leaves us 1,600. And if you split that in half, then now you're looking at 800 total. So you'd be looking at about 35% of 800, which is how much?
60, well, 55.
Yeah.
So 550.
About 550. Yeah.
So this graph represents as a total representation of everybody that came in. 52% are going to be parent drop-off. So that's probably pretty close, and that's about what it ran. Usually when I was doing buses at East, it was a little over, but about 220-ish a day riding the bus in the afternoon on 6 buses. And that gives you a little picture. All right, employee intent survey results. 213 of our teachers say, hey, let's get it back. I'm ready to come back to work. Let's do this thing, whatever it looks like. Let's go ahead and get after it, and that's great. Had 28 say that they intended to come, but they needed to request some accommodations. And that's what we're here for, is to work through an accommodations process to figure out what we can do that's going to be best for teachers, that allows us to provide the best that we can for students. And then 3 just said, I intend to request leave because of, and every one of those that said that, very real risk factors.
Those numbers are significantly different than a majority of other districts. I have heard superintendents speak of the fact that they're looking at 30 or 35% of their staff not returning.
That's an impressive number. I was surprised to see that high. That's awesome.
But I can tell you why it's that way. It's because we got the best teachers in North Carolina, and they work in Swain County.
And that's the thing, is that our teachers, they realize how integral they are to what we're doing for this community, and they don't want to fall short. There's nobody that's on this that is doing this for selfish reasons. I just don't believe that. It doesn't pay enough for it to be for selfish reasons. But we plan to accommodate every employee as much as we possibly can, and we have a thought process that we're putting together that we're going to have ready to roll out for Monday. It's kind of a decision tree to help employees decide what they should do and how we can support them in making those decisions. The employee intent survey results by school are right here. And again, I want to reiterate that our first goal is to accommodate employee need and educate our students. We have to balance that, because the reason that we're in the business we're in is to educate students, but we also have to accommodate our employees as much as we possibly can, because without them we can't do that. So that's just, there it is. So this is the number of faculty and staff that have replied by school, and it's color coded. Then we're going to go to employee leave options. All right, on these employee leave options, the couple of different things that we've got there is the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, and is a federal emergency paid sick leave and a family medical leave expansion. The first portion of that is 2 weeks, which is 80 hours of paid leave. The last piece of that is the family medical leave expansion, which is 10 weeks that goes on beyond that. So you have a 12-week entitlement. But the family medical leave expansion is only 2/3 pay. Now, they may use accumulated leave to make up for the rest of that, but that means that if you're out for 3 days, you're going to lose 1 day of sick leave to maintain full pay. But that's all the impact it's going to have on your leave totals. And really, guys, that's not bad. And then we have traditional Family Medical Leave Act, just traditional FMLA. If this stuff that has to do with the Coronavirus Relief Act does not apply to them, we have traditional FMLA, and we have accrued leave pursuant to state law and policies. Our Families First Coronavirus Relief Act is a federal emergency paid sick leave, provides 2 weeks or 80 hours of leave, full-time employees unable to work or telework due to covered reasons. It expires December the 31st. It may be used intermittently. So if that applies to me today, but it does not apply to me tomorrow, that I don't have to use all 80 hours just because I was out 1 day. It can be applied intermittently. The family medical leave expansion expands FMLA to cover leave needed because of child care related to COVID-19. FMLA has never covered child care before. So now we've added child care as a reason to be on FMLA, and recognizing that parents have a responsibility to take care of their children, and that they shouldn't have to choose between taking care of their child and losing their job. So this is just a means of us having the federal government stepping in and saying that employers need to do the right thing, which is we'd have done that anyway. We'd have figured something out. That's what we do. But it expires December the 31st of 2020 also. All right, the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, reasons 1 through 3 gets 100% pay or up to $511 a day I don't think any of us make that, but that'd be really cool if we did. The employee is subject to government quarantine or isolation for a COVID-19 order, which is the first three reasons, and healthcare provider has advised employee to self-quarantine, or an employee is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and is seeking a medical diagnosis. So you're going to get 100% of your pay for the time that applies to you.
And that's important, because we've got a lot of staff right now who are asking, so if I contract COVID, how's that going to affect me? You know, if I'm in school and I test positive, how's that going to affect me? And it's right there. What he just said is how that's going to affect them, okay?
If you're out for 14 days, if you're out for that reason, you're going to get 100% of your pay for those first 80 hours that you're out, or 2 weeks, whatever it works out, your work schedule is. That's not bad. All right? And it's not as, I wish that, because you could be out feasibly several times to be tested during this. And that's why we've got to be able to move between choice B and choice C so fluidly as we move through this. But reasons 4 through 6, which are employees caring for an individual, is due to a government order, a recommendation of quarantine, self-isolation, and they're experiencing symptoms, and it's not themselves, that goes to 2/3 pay, or up to $200 a day, whichever is less. So it's 2/3 of pay. Don't read that and say I get $200 a day if I do this. It's not like that. It's 2/3 of your pay. The most it could be is that. An employee is unable to work or virtual work from home because of child care responsibilities or any other substantially similar condition as specified by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So we've got some protections in place for our employer and for our employees, and as an employer, we intend to help them, first off, by mitigating their concerns, and secondly, by, if at all possible, to accommodate their needs to where they don't have to utilize any of this leave. And then if that's not the case, then we're going to, then we'll step in there and do what we got to do for our people. Now, the return to work process, and we'll go as fast as I can, a written request from the employee to us in the HR office. They have got to provide us with a medical reason or child care reason or whatever the case may be, but they've got to provide us with that so that we can make sure that we have all the information to make the right decision. And if just because you say as an employee, not that anybody would do that, and I'm not accusing anybody, but just because you say I've got severe asthma, I'm going to have a doctor's diagnosis if I'm going to put you on this stuff, because we've got to work around this. We've got to do it the right way. Second part is HR is going to initiate an interactive process with the employee. We're going to step up, me and the principal. We're going to get together and determine a reasonable accommodation that can be provided for the duties and responsibilities of the employee. So we're going to say, I know you can't do this, but can you do that? And we're going to try to come up with some things that we can do. We're going to offer that accommodation then, if it's available. And again, our goal is to provide an accommodation all the time, but there's certain roles, guys, that you can't accommodate. If I don't know what to do, I'm just going to use this as an example. If you're a bus driver and you can't drive a bus because of something due to COVID-19, I don't know how to accommodate you. Now, we're going to put our heads together and we're going to try our very best to figure it out, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know where we can go from there, but we're going to try to figure it out. But off the top of my head, that's one of the holes that I see, is that some of our jobs, I don't know where to go. Enhanced protective measures, modified schedules, telework, increased social distancing. There's all kinds of things that we can do to accommodate, and just a job shift. And then we've just reviewed the available leave options. We'd do that with our employees. We'd sit down there and say, okay, so what can we do? Since we couldn't do that, what can we do here? And then if none of that works, the only thing that we really have left is separation, resignation, retirement, or termination. And that is the last resort. We don't want to do that. We want to avoid that at all costs. I don't anticipate that being an issue, but we just have to be plain and fair about the process. All right. So I guess you really are rid of me now. You got any questions?
I guess I could send him home at this point, can't I? And let me emphasize what he said at the very end there. That last one, retirement, resignation, whatever, that is absolutely not on our radar. We want to do everything we can to keep our staff working I think we've shown that as we've gone through the spring months. And that's one of the reasons that I'm confident that we can pull off our remote learning with this product by using the services of a lot of the 28 teachers who just have decided they really would prefer not to be in the classroom, but they don't want to take that leave. And that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to accommodate that. And that's going to help everyone in the long run.
And the other thing is that if you're taking the accommodation and you end up needing the leave, if you took the leave to begin with, you don't have it anymore. If we're accommodating that, and then it turns out that something comes up and you need it, then you've already used your 80 hours, and it's just not in anybody's best interest. And 80 hours sounds like a long time, but it's not. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was locked in for 2 weeks. And I didn't have it, got tested twice, but when you go through the protocols, it just takes time to get that stuff rolling back in. And we have to try to do the right thing.
And the testing results are slower.
Yes, they are.
They are much slower now than they were in the beginning.
So, we want to accommodate, and we want employees to allow us to accommodate and not just jump to leave if at all possible, because it's not in their best interest either.
Right.
Any questions for Tommy? This is one of the most complicated parts right here. And Tommy handles this so well, and he is thankful that he has LaVonda sitting right next to him.
Because if I didn't,
because she's just a
it's
genius
just
when it comes to this.
It'd be way worse.
Any questions for him? I would encourage anyone? I would encourage any of our employees who have questions or concerns to get in touch with Tommy, because they'll have the answers for them. Okay? Thanks, Tommy.
Yes, sir.
Toby, come and lead us through some of the things that we've already probably talked about. And I know you. That's why you went last, right?
Yeah, a lot of this has already been covered, so we'll just hit the high spots and let y'all know that we're using the QT3, as alluded to earlier, to spray and disinfect. And this fogs up my glasses, so if that happens, I can't read anything off that sheet and we're dead meat. Each classroom will be equipped with that to spray as they go through, as well as our custodians. Custodian roles will change just a little bit. We're going to talk about that with them on Monday when we meet with them. And as he's already alluded to, we're going to try to beef that up just a little bit throughout the day, because with Jennifer delivering lunch and breakfast, there's going to be more trash on the floor. So we got to get rid of that stuff as well as cleaning. There will be hand sanitizer in every classroom and on every bus to use at all of our entrances throughout the school. So those will be plentiful as we go through that. We have our custodians systematically and frequently checked. They're going to develop a routine with the principal, and then they're going to sign off on that routine when they've completed it, so we can have accountability for what's been done and what hasn't been done as we move forward through that. We've covered what schools are responsible for there, custodians and staff as well. Do you have any questions that I might be able to answer that hasn't already been covered?
So much information.
Yeah.
I know. But I honestly don't know any other way to help you see all the pieces.
I mean, this has been very helpful.
And I know that this is overwhelming when you put all these pieces together. That's why, again, I want to come back again next week and talk about this. Because it'll give all of you an opportunity to look at this documentation. We'll share everything that we possibly can with the public and let them look at it as well. Because I want to alleviate as much of their anxiety and enable them to make the right decision for their family. We want to serve the people. Yes, they still have an option. Yes. And we want to do our very best, Jerry, to take care of them that way.
What will
Kim?
be the deadline for parents' decisions about which option they want to take? Their drop dead day?
We're going to, excuse me, Kim, I'm going to call. That was interesting. You wait till that happens in the classroom.
Yeah, people are going to hit the floor.
I'm thinking that we will initiate the process of parents choosing Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, and then we'll probably give them a week to make a decision and sign up, because we need to go ahead and to give our principals an opportunity to start looking at the numbers that they're dealing with. So if I were to pick a date right now, it would be July 30th. And that's really putting us on a tight deadline.
And another thing, they're gonna change their mind. There's gonna be kids midstream, are they gonna be able to do that?
No. And here's
So
why.
if they decide to go with C,
They need to stick with C. And right now, what we're saying is they need to stick to C until the end of the semester. And the reason for that is we don't know when we're going to come out of this state of emergency, and we have bus issues that we have to think about.
so even if they're in B, and for instance, there is a case, it scares the parents or, concerns the parents.
If they will, in that case, we will have a hardship option. If they have to leave, we'll work on that with them. The harder part is bringing them back in.
Right.
Okay? And that's the one piece that I don't like about this, but based on the number restrictions that we have to put that parameter on.
Okay.
Let me just add to the cleaning and hygiene, something else that falls under that is we've changed the procedures for student check-in and check-out at most every one of our schools. The only one we haven't addressed yet is the high school, because frankly, we don't know what it's going to look like yet. When the new parts are finished, we'll know a lot more. But there's going to be some different things in place, and parents just need to be aware of that when they enter the school to observe whatever the direction is. We're going to try to basically make a safe zone that's our bubble, and the public won't pass that point, whatever that point is. That'll be staff and students only, so it's kind of like our bubble, if you will, that they're not going to be at. And we're also in the midst, Karen Cook and Brandon Messer and myself have been investigating, trying to find kiosks that will do temperature checks with facial recognition so that we can record faces in that and do temperature checks and get that out of the way for some of our staff who are going to have to do that manually until we can investigate that a little bit further, but that would free them up to be able to be in the classroom since we are sending kids there first. That's about it for cleaning and hygiene unless you have questions. And as far as transportation goes, everybody's pretty well covered it from start to finish here. It's been one of the underlying factors in everything we've talked about. They've hit on the fact that we've got 22 buses. I think we run 20 routes with 2 spare buses. The largest bus we have has 22 seats, which means it'll seat 22 people. That's the largest. All of them aren't 22. Some are 18. And you can get into that whole, well, why don't we get bigger buses? Well, it's hard to drive them on these roads. You need the smaller wheelbase there to drive the roads that we have. So it's going to be a challenge. In best case scenario to predict right now, there's some of those routes that we might have to run 4 trips on. And we can't do that because we can't deliver kids to the schools until 7:20 when people are there to screen them. And that makes it really tough because you can't do 2 routes when you have to do that. And we don't want to be bringing kids home at 8 o'clock at night because they have to stay somewhere until we deliver them and they can't congregate. So what do? So it's a real catch-22 in terms of what we're going to do in bus transportation. Normally, we can do a good job of that and have over the years, but with just 1 student per seat, it's going to be really hard. And it's going to be really hard not just for us across the state of North Carolina. And I have a feeling that many of these places who have opted to go C have opted to go C for this reason.
That's it.
That it's just so hard to get your kids to and from school with only 1 kid per bus, or bus seat rather. So that's going to be a real bear for us, and we just ask everybody's patience, and that's one of the reasons we're digging for data, trying to find out how many we're going to have so we can start looking at what some of those loads are going to look like, and that may predicate schedules in terms of what we can and can't do. So just kind of keep that in mind, and I'm sure you'll be hit with some of those questions by the public because they want to know answers to this. And right now, we just don't have answers. Until we get some data and can put some names with seats, we can't do a whole lot more. And the other thing that you will probably get hit. That hasn't been mentioned, and I haven't talked to Mr. Sale about talking about this, but I think it's worth you knowing that there are some who call for us to do temperature checks and screening as we pick kids up. But we've opted not to do that. And the reason is because if they don't pass that screening, where do they go? And we'd rather have them with us with the uncertainty than standing alone by themselves if they're a first grader or second grader. And so there's reasons for that. And we also can't provide another person to be on that bus to help with the screening because we just don't have the available personnel. We've got everybody at each school pretty well divvied up to be taking temperatures, to do screening, to help traffic flow control, to be in classrooms and all of those things. So it's just easier and safer, more importantly, for us to put that kid on the bus with the knowledge, as we said earlier, that the parents have screened that and they're not putting an unhealthy child on our bus and bring them on to school. So just so you know that and our reasoning behind that, I think it's very important that you know because there'll be people who are going to ask that, they're going to ask that of us, and we're fine with that. We think that's the one thing we found out throughout this whole process is there are a lot of decisions you have to make, and sometimes you just make the best one you think you can make for the safety of the kids and move forward. And so that's what we've done in that situation, but I wanted you to know about it beforehand. Our drivers are going to spray those bus seats down before their route, after their route, and in between the route, the windows will be down so that it can ventilate throughout that. So as far as the actual cleanliness of the bus, that shouldn't be an issue for us at all. It again is going to go back to that whether or not we can get kids on the bus and get them safely where we need to go to and from. So any questions about bus or communication or transportation, rather, not communication?
I'm going to back up on what I said just a minute ago. Let me think more about that.
Well, I was just thinking, if a kid does, gets tested COVID and comes back positive, it may be other students or parents that don't feel comfortable sending them to school. It's going to happen, but do they have a choice once they're in midstream?
And I'm going to stand still today on what I said. It's easier to move into remote learning than to move back out of remote learning back into the classroom. It's a numbers issue. Mm-hmm. But even on that, let us think about that and see if there's a way that we can work that. I'm not convinced that we can. We can move out. Moving back is difficult. It has to do with numbers. Okay?
It might be, set up something where if you got, that you tell them they might be able to move in when we have somebody move out.
Yeah.
If there's a slot available and they have a list they got, they may not get into October or November.
Well, I'm sitting here, you saw me thinking, I'm sure, I'm sitting here thinking if our bottom line is we believe that the best place for a student is in front of a teacher, then we need to think about that. So that's another reason that I wanted to have a conversation tonight, put these pieces out there, listen to you all, let you all look at your information, and then come back next week and have a final conversation. Okay? Have we missed anything?
Communication was the last thing on your
Well,
list.
and the communication piece is that we're going to share everything that we possibly can with the public and give them the information so that they can begin to make final decisions.
And we also intend on putting on as many places as we can a Q&A sheet that answers a lot of these questions prior to people having them. We're just waiting until next week so we can get a little bit more of our ducks in a row with what we're doing before we put that together. But sort of as a preemptive, because I know there's parents out there with tons of questions, and legitimately so, and we want to answer them. So the best thing we can do is try to be proactive in that manner and do that.
We'll do that. Any questions, any thoughts that anyone, Kim, anyone that you have right now for us to take with us?
No, I think just that you've done a great job of communicating that this is a document that, or a plan, a program that could change, even day by day, or hope not, but, periodically it could change. And I think that that's where we all need to keep an open mind going forward, and having a lot of understanding and patience. And like I said, this is, it's the first time we've seen this, and it's overwhelming for me and everyone, I think, in that room, and probably everyone who's listening. So I just would ask everybody to have patience and understanding, and just have a come at it as a we're all on the same team. Let's all work at it for the common good. And I don't know. Other than that, I have missed the thoughts
Okay.
at this moment.
You do have Teresa still standing on deck back here.
I can feel the aura. Anything else? Okay, like I said, we'll be back again next week to discuss this point, or this item, at 6 o'clock on Thursday. But for now, we've got to finish our board meeting. I need that to finish the board meeting. Yeah. That takes us to talking about the Milk Bid Award, and then we'll talk about our CTE local plans. So, Jennifer, you want to talk to us? You need to come up here.
This is a renewal year for our milk bid, and so did the milk bid process, and I'm recommending that Pet Dairy be awarded the bid for the 2020-2021 school year.
Yes, that'll be something that you'll need to approve. Do you have any questions for Jennifer? Okay, we'll put that into the action items, okay?
Okay.
And Teresa, come and talk to us about the CTE plan, please, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm here to request approval for our CTE application for state and federal funding. You should have the letter in your packet. So there was a 113-page document that is the application, which I did not print for you. It addresses where we are, where we want to go, and the strategies and action steps of how to get there. The new Perkins 5 legislation required all systems to conduct a comprehensive local needs assessment, which included forming a CTE leadership team of various school personnel, conducting surveys, and having discussions for CTE stakeholders regarding our programs, and then coming back together as a leadership team to review survey results and evaluate the CTE performance indicators and where we stand compared to the state goals. As a result of the surveys, labor market analysis, and student interest, CTE is adding additional pathways and certifications this year. They are business management, computer engineering technology, and travel and tourism. The strategies and action plan steps are implemented. Those that we're trying to implement are included in this application, as well as addressing our performance indicators. The CTE Regional Coordinator has reviewed the plan, provided feedback, and approved the submission. So while I had several more things I can say, and I thought I might have time to say about CTE, I'll be happy to come back another time and discuss that when appropriate. If I can just get your signatures tonight to approve the CTE plan so we can get our funding for our program.
Look good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's exciting to know you're adding some programs. That's awesome.
Yes, we're all excited, and students are excited. I heard a lot of good positive.
Good.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
How close are you to the barn being done?
We've asked for an extension until next September, but Derek doesn't think it's going to take that long. They just automatically granted another year. So it just depends on how many students we're going to get in, and he's worked hard and fast. If you haven't been up to see it, drive by there. We've been very impressed. And actually, I was able to take some extra funding that I didn't know I was going to have due to not having to pay for some CTSO events. And and put on that project. That's helped, because really with that grant, we were supposed to come like half and half with that grant and provide some funds somehow, even in-kind funds. And so between Derek and the CTE funds, we've more than passed that obligation. So we're real excited of what all we've been able to invest in that barn. So I would say spring, maybe, at the latest, September next year.
Well, and I know that the shutdown of the schools slowed that down a little bit, but Derek has continued to work on that on his own.
Yes.
Even after falling off his roof and breaking his back, you know, and I'm not going to say he did that whatever he was told not to, but, because I don't think he did, but Derek's the kind of guy, he's going to work, you know, so we've got to keep her in him.
Yes.
I hear absolutely nothing but very positive things about him.
Unless you talk to his wife. Unless you talk to his wife. No, I'm just kidding.
He's a go-getter and has a lot of energy. He puts it to good use.
The kids like him,
Yes.
parents, yeah.
And he loves them too.
I need to tell, you can tell.
Anything for Teresa?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
darling.
I'll get with you after the meeting for
Okay.
signatures.
We'll be here at 11, it'll be okay.
You need to change your pronoun there.
That's right. Kim, you're not laughing.
I'm laughing.
Oh, okay, all right. So that takes care of all of the discussion, unless you want to add something.
I'm good.
We don't have any personnel, do we? Unless y'all want to go and discuss personnel.
I have no reason to discuss personnel.
Okay, I figured you
good.
wouldn't, but
I'm good.
give you the opportunity. Then we move to the action, and in doing so, I recommend that the Swain County Board of Education approve the minutes of the June 8th, 2020 open session meeting and the June 30th, 2020 special call meeting.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Did you say aye, Kim?
And I'm,
Okay.
That was
Thank you.
unanimous, thanks.
I recommend the Swain County Board of Education approve the policies that are listed there. I'm not going to take time to read them all. It's that book that's laying right
Yeah,
there.
it's a bunch of policies.
Okay?
Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion on the approval of policies? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Kim said aye.
Kim said aye.
Yeah,
That
I'm
was
reading-
unanimous. You're reading her
She
lips.
raised her hand. I'm reading her lips here, yes. I recommend the Swain County Board of Education approve the remote learning plan as we presented it to you tonight.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Kim
I heard
already
her.
has.
Yep. That was unanimous.
I recommend the Swain County Board of Education approve the milk bid award of Dean Corporate Pet Dairy for the 2020-2021 school year.
Make a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 She got it.
Yeah, that was unanimous.
I recommend the Swain County Board of Education approve the CTE local plan for the 2020-2021 school year. Somebody vote against this, please.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion?
We've got 2 seconds. She seconded, you did it too, okay?
Who's taking notes?
We are.
Oh, well, we're recording, that's
Recording it.
right, yeah. I'm so used to seeing Joanne up here.
A bunch of our folks are on vacation this week because they had training last
Good
week
for
and they've
them.
got training next week, so they squeezed it in.
Perfect, no problem.
To my knowledge, those are all of the action items.
I don't think we actually voted on that one.
Did we not?
Aye, on the CTE plan, say aye. Did we vote?
Aye.
I thought we did, but I don't know.
Well-
Did we vote on the CTE plan? No.
We have twice. It was unanimous.
Tommy was a 5th vote. Okay. You see the FYI calendar events. Jumpstart starts Monday, and
Wow.
that's the kind of the summer reading program. We've got, how many students do we have in Jumpstart? 50-ish between 2 schools. The students will start on Tuesday. Teachers start on Monday. and it'll run for 8 days for the students. And I'm just thankful that we're able to do that right now.
That's great, yeah.
And we'll be using that as a test case also,
To
to see
see.
how we can get kids in and out of the building. I don't know when the August meeting is right now. The bigger meeting for me is next week,
Next week.
okay?
Yeah.
So keep that on your calendar. And that Gear Up staff meeting, that's a trip, and they're not going. That particular conference, which was for PLC training, has been canceled
Which is a
because it's in San
shame.
Antonio.
But, yeah,
Yeah, we'll catch them up on that though by doing some remote training.
great.
They'll allow us to do that. As far as I know, folks, that's all we've got. And I know it was long, but I appreciate you sticking around.
Don't see anyone here signed up for public comment, so.
Don't see any. So, Ms. Burns, we're ready to go. Wait a minute, Kim?
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
What is the student start date? Is that the August 17th?
August 17th is a hard date across the state. Yes, ma'am. Teachers are scheduled to come in on August the 10th. Okay?
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye, because we're not discussing it. Now we should-
Kim, raise your hand.
I did too.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.